We'll start the meeting with citizens' concerns or comments. Okay, since no one is here, we'll go down to regular session minutes of January 10th.
I'll make a motion that we accept the January 10th meeting minutes as written.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
The next thing on the agenda is, well, we've got our football team here this evening. Dr. Brunel, why don't you?
The whole football team.
Sure. Well, players.
We couldn't fit them all in the room.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Gribbins. I would like to, perhaps if you'll come up to the podium so everyone can see all of you, recognize Coach Cormier. You can come on up to of the Auburn High football team, as well as 3 of his captains, which I will allow him to introduce them. As you're likely aware, everyone, the Auburn High football team did win the Super Bowl championship for Division IIA. And I had the opportunity to attend a few of their games, including the one on Thanksgiving Day. And not only did they play extremely well athletically on the field, but just as with all of the other athletic teams, they also commit to community service and are some of our academically high-achieving students. So I certainly tip my hat to them and turn it over to Mr. Cormier, and perhaps he can do an introduction for us.
Thank you. These are 3 of our captains. John LaRue is our 4th captain. He's at the Celtics game tonight. Found out today, so he wasn't able to be with us. This is Marcin Dvorak, Corey Roy, Alex Fillier. All 3 of these guys run our honor roll. John LaRue is on high honors. I think you're on high, so please do it right. Again, just, as Dr. Brunel alluded to, good student athletes, and it's a credit to the community and to you people who take advantage of opportunities that you've provided, both in the classroom and on the fields. These guys are multi-sport athletes. They are playing more than more than one sport. They all perform their community service. In fact, some of these guys just did their second yesterday in helping box up all the books for the Invisible Children drive. I think they boxed about 15,000 books. And did that yesterday. And during the school year, they went around, they brought books in, and then 2 other kids went around to all the elementaries, picked them up, packed them. So it's good for them. It's nice for them to get out and do those kinds of things. And over the years, they've done heating assistance programs with people in the community, raise money for oil and heating fuel and stuff like that. So they've done some pretty good things, and I'm sure they're going to continue to reflect not only our program, but the community at large as they move on to college. Marcin is looking to progress into the nursing program. Right now looking at Endicott and Salve Regina, I believe.
Yep.
Corey's looking to do business,
Yes.
Possibly at Holy Cross, or Curry. He's been accepted to Curry, he's waiting on Holy Cross.
Right.
And Alex is looking to go in health sciences, and your colleges are choice of you.
UMass Boston and Worcester State.
Great.
They're
Excellent.
awaiting that process, as well as another thing we make these guys do is, as of October 1st, these guys, they're in a good position now having their stuff, and if they don't have their college essays and stuff done by October 1st, we don't allow them to come to practice. So if their stuff isn't done, they don't practice. So
Wow,
that's
tough.
and they grumble and grow, but they all get
Yeah,
their
that's
college
good.
essays in, and and when the English department does a nice job, all the seniors are going to get them into me. They get checked off, students get checked, they're allowed back, they can come to practice. We send them down to the English department, they do a nice job, they go through the kids' stuff, so they've all gotten their stuff back, and it's nice, those guys get their stuff out ahead of time, a little ahead of the game, so some of them starting to receive acceptances now, so it's kind of credit to these guys, how organized they are.
That's great. Well, and I would say too, I think it's indicative of the high expectations that you have, not only on the playing field or the court or whatever, depending on the sport, but also in the classroom. And I applaud that. That's wonderful. That's great.
It's a good situation. They, it's credit again to the community. They have nice facilities athletically and academically, and people listen to take advantage of those opportunities, and they do. So it's good to see.
Good. Great.
What positions do you play? I know you're a kicker, right, Corey?
Yes, ma'am.
You're a kicker.
Least of his duties.
Yeah, well, you're
I
running
know,
back.
I
You're
mean,
running
you don't want
back
to
too.
minimize those, but
No,
he
you're
does a
running
lot
back
more.
too, right? I know that.
The Super Bowl game, Corey, after the 4th or 5th play, the game broke his foot. We didn't know it was broken. We thought it was sprained. We took him out because he was kind of limping, but he went back in. He had an interception, 20-yard field goal, 2 PATs, and 3 carries for like 19 yards after the broken foot. So.
Wow.
That was it?
Well, we wanted to limit him,
I personally would like to just congratulate you guys. You know how much I'm a proponent of sports, so it's very nice to see. And academically, I'm really proud of you guys and proud of the representation that you do for our town. It's wonderful. And Coach Cormier, I know that's a direct reflection on you and your coaching staff as to how you instill all of these attributes to these athletes, and I appreciate that as well. So congratulations, guys.
Thank you.
Wayne?
I'd just kind of like to back up Leanne on that and say that, you know, congratulations, you guys had a tremendous year. I like the way you do your program, the coaches, you make sure the academics stay up, and you keep them in sports, and you guys did a great job, fantastic. And I want to thank you from the school committee for, and congratulations.
Thank you. See, these guys need to hear that because they get progress back to the academic. They get progress reports every other week, and you guys explain to them what happens if your grades are below C's.
You either don't practice, or you have to go pick up all the equipment, set all the equipment out.
That's your only ticket to practice.
Pass if you stay after.
You can stay up for your extra help, and they don't come to practice unless the academic teacher signs their passes. So
Right.
They don't like that. So.
Well, their point of view, it's probably a bad thing to say, but my point of view, I'm glad it works.
You got 100. We had about 87 kids, and 5 or 6 kids, are struggling. You're gonna check them off. 5 or 6 kids don't pass it, and you immediately found out who has below C. So record keeping's fun.
Juan?
I'd just like to say how proud I am of you. We can't say it enough. You're such a credit to the school, to the community, to your families, to yourselves. It's a wonderful thing.
Janie?
And, you probably don't appreciate it now because he's probably a pain to you. When you're running those wind sprints are absolutely no fun and all the rest of that stuff. But you really will be able to carry those skills over. I'm sure all the time management that you have to get your homework done to maintain the C and all the rest of that stuff will bode well for you when you get into college. And he's not there.
They come back.
That's great. That's a tribute to you. That's
We
great.
have some alumni that have come back and helped us. We run the Blackstone Clinic in the summer and stuff. And kids come back and help coach. We've got, Jeff Austin Miller has come back. And, some names escape me, Andy Moss, Andy Mom. The guys have come back. Minnie's been back. So those kids, it's nice. They come back, to their roots. They come back and anything they can do to volunteer or help out. Or, it's been a good thing.
That's great.
Yeah,
Well,
thank
you obviously have the
Thank you.
skills to go far in life. Make sure you get there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Congratulations, guys.
And you made you wear ties tonight and everything, huh?
That's the way they have to.
I don't make them do anything that behaves it.
Do you just suggest? Yeah.
Pleasantly surprised. All at the same time. I told Corey we had court.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Bye.
That's such a nice thing.
And I have to say that when I came in here and I went over to introduce myself to them, they all stood up. They all looked me straight in the face. They all shook hands with me. And those are the kind of skills that really make a difference. Okay. So the next part of our agenda will be the 2010 budget presentations from the elementary schools.
If I can just do, thank you, Mrs. Gribbins, a brief opening. It is my pleasure to welcome the 4 elementary principals here this evening. As I think they have done in the past, they're going to do somewhat of a joint presentation. And we saved them and have them put together because as elementary schools, their issues, staffing, and supplies and material requests are somewhat similar. Unlike at the secondary level, both the middle school and high school, where students pass between classes and may have a number of different teachers throughout the day. Certainly at the primary level and perhaps a bit less so at intermediate, students come in and they're with their primary teacher, their main teacher, for all day long. So you may see that as we did our cuts and as we worked together as a leadership team, to cut one teacher at an elementary school level could very negatively impact class size, and I know that's a priority for school committees. So you're not going to see that we have made cuts in terms of teachers. It's far too important to have appropriate class sizes at those foundational levels. But likewise, the elementary really did not put in for a tremendous amount to increase their program. So without further ado, I hope I'm not taking any of your presentation from you. I'll turn it over and just introduce Mrs. Kathy Goldstein as the principal of the Julie Bancroft School, Mrs. Kathleen Lozay, principal of the Packagug School, Mrs. Beth Chase, principal of the Mary G. Stone School, and Mrs. Pat Haggerty, principal of the Bryn Mawr School.
Thank you, Dr. Brunel. Members of the Auburn School Committee, good evening. On behalf of my colleagues, Mrs. Chase, Mrs. Lozay, and Mrs. Haggerty, I thank you for the review and consideration of our budget request for fiscal year 2010. At the elementary level, as Dr. Brunel has mentioned, our budget requests largely are driven by our common goal of providing teachers with the kinds of materials and support that they need in order to enhance student learning. With a model of one teacher in each classroom, on average of 21 to 23 children, our budgets are fairly straightforward. Historically, the elementary budgets have been rather austere, so we have sought to enhance our budgets through programmatic changes. In fiscal year 2010, we are not seeking additional positions beyond those required by the specific needs of students, as will be referenced in individual budget reviews. Having valued the math paraprofessionals currently in place, there is one math paraprofessional position, but not under Title I. However, we are hopeful that we will be able to retain the other math paraprofessionals through the Title I grant. While each of the 4 budgets has been prepared by individual principals with needs specific to each building, the overarching goals, which inform line items, reflect collaboration and consensus. In the context of challenging economic times, all 4 of us strive to ensure exemplary teaching and learning efforts that will yield high levels of achievement among all of our students. Toward that end, we will begin by focusing on our shared priorities for the coming year and how we will align our efforts to achieve our individual and collective goals. We will gladly entertain your questions at the end of our presentation.
Thank you, Mrs. Goldstein. Good evening, members of the committee. I will be speaking about some of the programmatic emphases that all 4 of us share in all of the elementary schools. What this is perhaps is similar to a condensation of our executive summaries in many ways. The first item that I would like to address this evening is literacy. And as you know, literacy is really at the core of everything we do at the elementary level. And if you recall, last year, we spoke to you about a new assessment tool that we were going to be utilizing, and that was DIBBLES. And it's named DIBBLES, but it stands for Dynamic Indicators of Basic Early Literacy Skills. And dibbling has nothing to do with dribbling or basketball or sports. It might be more fun, but it's a wonderful tool that we are using. We are currently into our 2nd year of using this assessment tool. It consists of 3 benchmark tests that we administer to our students in the fall, winter, and spring. And the results of these assessments provide us with a wealth of information in terms of how we next can move on to addressing the needs of our students. The use of DIBBLES also helps us immensely in the next phase of our strategic plan and of our 3-year literacy initiative. The next step is actually response to intervention, which involves basically providing students with additional doses of literacy practice, literacy information, literacy exercising, as needed by the particular child. So this year we are into the phase of doing professional development and receiving professional development on the phase of response to intervention, which is being provided to us by Ideal Consulting, who gave us our start with DIBBLES. So we are working on progress monitoring this year, and it's totally aligned with our literacy initiative, and also it really complements what we are doing, and it is really the thrust and the basis of what we are doing for professional development this year.
I'm going to talk just a little bit more in detail about response to intervention, or RTI for short, And it's really an approach to instruction that allows the schools to organize our resources in a really efficient way, with the ultimate goal of maximizing student achievement. It's a way to look at students, as Mrs. Haggerty has said, to determine what they need to master the curriculum. Our professional development days this year have been geared primarily to introducing this to our staff members and training them in the use of it. Our TI is organized around a three-tier model. Tier 1 is the instruction that's available to all students, most often delivered by their classroom teacher. And these are the strategies and techniques, the bag of tricks, if you will, that all classroom teachers have when they see a student having difficulty and needing a little bit more in the way of instruction. The Tier 2 interventions are designed for when a child might be having a tad bit more difficulty. These interventions are individualized and they're tailored to the unique needs of each child, who, despite help from that classroom teacher, is still having difficulty. The interventions in Tier 2 are programs or approaches to instruction that are research-based, very important in this day and age, and give the child another dose of instruction or a different approach so that they can master that curriculum. A very important part of this Tier 2 that Mrs. Haggerty mentioned is the frequent monitoring, to be sure that the second dose that we're giving them is in fact effective. The Tier 3 interventions are the most intensive. These are the programs and approaches that are most often specially designed for students and come under the realm of special needs with an IEP. Although RTI can be put into place for any subject area that a student might be having difficulty with or behavioral issues, in Auburn our focus is on the literacy this year, as we said. And Mrs. Lozay is now going to talk a little bit about one particular Tier 2 intervention that all 4 of the elementary schools are using this year.
Thank you. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the Great Leaps Fluency Program. As we assess our students with DIBELS and DRA, one of the 5 components that we look at is fluency. And fluency is basically the combination of speed and accuracy and phrasing that students use while they're reading. We have different benchmarks at every grade level at different points in the year that the students should meet. However, some of our students are not meeting those benchmarks, and so as a Tier 2 intervention, we have adopted the Great Leaps program. Some of the key components to this program include the fact that it's based on the research practice of timed repeated readings. It's user-friendly, so it's easily implemented by teachers, IAs, or volunteers. It's time efficient. It takes approximately 3 minutes per day per identified student. It's systematic because students must master one level before moving on to the next. And it's student-centered because we engage the children in daily charting of their performance. And as they see their progress, they get excited and they really own this type of intervention. At this point, our elementary reading teachers have provided training to all the individuals that will be delivering this program, and each of us principals have devised schedules that will allow for this to happen. We are just beginning this, so we look forward to great things, and we'll keep you updated.
Rounding out the part of our literacy presentation, we know that initially at the beginning of the year, our parents fill out home language surveys indicating what the home language in fact is. For our primary and intermediate students, that's critical because it certainly informs their language acquisition as they enter formal language training. Earlier this year, as required by the Department of Education, a group of teachers and administrators participated in Category 1 ESL trainings to lay the groundwork to support those English language learners in our classrooms. The training offered participants an opportunity to learn about second language acquisition, the interrelationship of language and culture, an introduction to what is commonly referred to in ESL as ELPOs, and those are the English language proficiency benchmarks and outcomes for English language learners and 4 proficiency levels. They include also responsive learning environments and reflection and analysis of classroom practice. It certainly was a rather engaging day's experience as we shared anecdotally our own personal experiences with language acquisition. I'm thinking back, for example, that Mrs. Haggerty talked about her early education
an acquisition of French as a second language through her formative years, and that certainly influenced her language learning, having that command of a second language. And when we look at students and their acquisition of language, we see those students who come to us with that second language as a home language as such a gift, an opportunity to really look at how their culture, their home language, and their experience will inform not only the classroom for themselves, but for their peers within the classroom. We will look forward then to being able to sustain that effort by looking at the categories, trainings that are subsequent to that, knowing that full well our students will be the great beneficiaries of that. We're going to move on into mathematics. And look at, I'll look back actually as I think about this, because the person who comes to the front of my vision is Mrs. Johnson, who stood before us not too long ago at her retirement evening with you. Upon adoption of the Everyday Math Series, Districts 1 and 2 formed an elementary school math curriculum committee several years ago that was initiated and overseen by Mrs. Johnson. The committee, looking at the new math series, created trimester and end-of-year assessments in order to monitor student progress while using the new series. When Beth Johnson retired, she handed over to me very carefully, making me promise that I would take good care to ensure that all pages stayed intact and that the effort was sustained. And before letting go of what she had in her hand, she looked at me and said, "I am handing over to you my math Bible. Take good care." And I promised her that I would in fact do that, and I would assure her that the assessment work would continue and that we would build upon the important work of what she and her committee had initiated. The end-of-year assessment is given again in the fall as a baseline measure of the achievement, and also as an indicator of retention, knowing that during the summer, while we'd like to think that those math facts are being practiced, just in case they weren't, we want to make sure that we have some indicator of where we need to begin. With MCAS results also, these assessments guide instruction and our classroom organization. But also, perhaps even most importantly, the Math Committee affords this group of elementary school teachers across all grades the opportunity and time. I want to pause there for a moment. The opportunity and the time to be part of a professional learning community, discussing math practice, sharing insights about the use of the text and the materials, using data to form instruction. The committee meets 3 times a year, with a focus this year on editing the tests that had been previously created to make sure that they align with the new edition of the text. We view this effort as a key means of maintaining communication and consistency across all of our elementary schools.
I will continue from where Mrs. Goldstein has left off in terms of this concept of committees and professional learning communities, and further tell you that in the absence of a curriculum director for our district, the principals, the elementary principals and other principals in the district have had to assume quite a few leadership roles in terms of curriculum development and curriculum alignment. And these roles are normally undertaken by a curriculum director. But when you are asked by your superintendent to assume a role, you are more than happy to step forward and absolutely grab that gauntlet and move forward. So just as Mrs. Goldstein has taken upon herself the mantle of the Math Committee, I was asked in 2006 to form a social studies committee of elementary staff members to evaluate the social studies materials that we were using and to explore and review new publications and new social studies materials. And as you know, quite a bit of money was spent at the end of 2006 for the purchase of new social studies materials published by Harcourt Brace. And we are happily using those. And as a matter of fact, my teachers reviewed some of those materials today, and we were talking about social studies curriculum. Let me add, though, that this committee has now extended itself, and therefore I guess I am extending myself in the sense that I have been asked by Dr. Brunel to work with Mr. Handfield and to elaborate on this committee and make this a K-12 committee. So I am eagerly looking forward to doing that. And as you know, in my previous roles, that was part of what I did. So I am looking forward to that engagement with Mr. Hanfield in terms of further alignment and looking for a really good way of doing some curriculum mapping, no pun intended as far as social studies is concerned, but curriculum mapping and alignment for the social studies. I do want to continue by saying that I was telling my colleagues earlier that sometimes when I do get fatigued and tired, I tend to get a little, perhaps too humorous, so just, you could just shut me off.
I love it.
if need
Keep
be.
going.
Really. You should be tired all the time.
Yeah.
Another aspect of curriculum development is being taken upon by Mrs. Lozay and Mrs. Chase, who are going to be working on an ELA committee, an English Language Arts committee, to, again, further review and look at some of the materials we are using. We're all using Houghton Mifflin, and we're going to continue using Houghton Mifflin. But again, it would be it's always good to refresh and review, kind of like you refresh your button on the computer. We need to kind of refresh ourselves. We need to refresh our practice so that we can better serve our students. So that's what they will be doing. New this year is a District 1 and District 2 literacy focus group. And this has been an exciting group to be a part of, because it consists of the elementary principals, the 4 reading specialists from each of our buildings, and Dr. Brunel. And many issues have come to the forefront in terms of literacy, complementing our literacy initiative, certainly, and even opening up some other issues that we are surprised are there. But they all really support some of the things that we're doing, such as response to intervention. They're even supporting some of our service learning initiatives. And I'm very happy to tell you that hopefully we will be supporting the high school and the 2 primary schools in a really exciting project that we're simply calling the Literacy Project, but there'll be more news on that forthcoming. But keep your eyes and ears opened. And I believe Mrs. Ottner has sent out the grant that I completed, so we should be hearing from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education on an expansion grant for service learning that will involve this particular project, this particular literacy project for the high school and Mary D. and Bryn Mawr. And it will involve the TV production crew class, I should say, and some of the athletes, student athletes at the high school, as well as National Honor Society and Student Council. So that's about it for curriculum, and I will speak in a few moments further on service learning.
Questions now?
Well, I think they were asking at the beginning if we could wait till the end of the presentation.
The next area we're going to talk about is social learning and safety. And this is always a top priority for the elementary as well as all the schools in Auburn. 2 years ago, the primary buildings began implementing the Second Step program for character education. Last year, the intermediate schools took on Steps to Respect, which was the follow-up to that program. This year, in our efforts to try to ensure consistency and to update our staff, Dr. Brunel asked Beth Johnson to provide elementary-wide training in these programs to all members of the elementary staff. This was inclusive of classroom teachers, specialists, IAs, and even cafeteria workers. And the goal of doing that was to help provide everyone with a common language, so that even though a classroom teacher may deliver the initial lesson on the topic, it can easily be reinforced across the entire setting within the school. Everyone has the common vocabulary, and we can reinforce those behaviors that we want to see. At this point, mid-year, for a mid-year check, we are going to ask Mrs. Johnson to come back for a second training session to help review and answer any questions that any of the staff may have about second steps and steps to respect. In addition, we have something exciting. Packagug and Julia Bancroft schools are currently involved in PBIS. This is Positive Behavioral Intervention Strategies. This training has been made possible through a grant that Rick McInerney has written for us, and it allows for teams from both sides of town to attend 6 full days of training. Some of the things we're excited about is that we've found it to be a wonderful complement to Second Step and Steps to Respect, so the programs that we already have in place can be continued and complement this. Some of the other key components to this is that it's a very proactive approach to school-wide discipline rather than always focusing on the negative. It's research-based, and it has been shown to not only decrease discipline issues, but to significantly improve the school climate, and we think that's a wonderful byproduct of this program. The teams are going to work together this year at the school level to create school-wide behavioral expectations. They'll get input from the entire staff in terms of setting these up. And then they need to work together to also create specific lessons that teach these expectations to our students across all the settings. I think sometimes we can outline and tell them what the expected behavior is, but we never explicitly teach them or show them what it looks like in different settings. Yes, you need to be respectful in the classroom, but this looks this way. But when you're in an assembly, it looks this way. So we plan to spend the first 2 or 3 days of school actually focused on all of these lessons and taking the kids through this. Many of these lessons will be drawn from the Steps to Respect program. Others will complement it. One of the things that is critical to this program's success is not only the development of a continuum of consequences for violating behavioral expectations, but more importantly is a reinforcement system for acknowledging the appropriate behavior of our students. Also, another little byproduct is that this positive behavior approach rewards teachers for rewarding students for the appropriate behavior. This program also aligns with our initiative around RTI because it's built on the 3-tier model, as Mrs. Chase described to you. So again, this year is our training and development year with plans to implement it for next year. And I just want to finish by saying that we believe that Mr. McInerney's goal in having the 2 intermediate schools participate together was really to allow for the 2 sides of school to come together at the middle school. And hopefully the byproduct will be that there'll be less discipline problems because we'll all have the same set of expectations, and I've taught our children those.
Thank you for that segue, Mrs. Lozay, because we have less in terms of discipline issues at the elementary schools or the middle school or the high school. We will be able to ensure what all 4 of us certainly walk into our buildings each morning and remind ourselves that paramount for us each day is to keep our buildings safe, to keep children safe. And so certainly the efforts of RTI will support that. But we don't do that alone. And one thing that we truly value is the collaboration with the fire department and the police department in trying to help us achieve that goal. So we certainly embrace the town-wide multi-hazard team and their efforts to ensure that safety does play out each day in our building. When they come for fire drills, we welcome them. We check ourselves out to see just how quickly we can do that or in a timely way, although the fire chief very often reminds us, no, Mrs. Goldstein, it's not about how quickly, it's about how safely. Yes, I'll try to prove, I stopwatch in my pocket. Not think about that. But they do, and they make visits frequently. But the effort on the part of the multi-hazard team this year was really twofold. One, at Julia Bancroft, perhaps because John Giordano was on the committee, and he certainly had familiarity with the building. They chose Julia Bancroft as the site to renumber all of the interior and exterior doors, and not only renumber them, but have them represented with illuminated materials placed at appropriate levels for identification should an emergency ensue, smoke were to fill the building. So those are very, very well illuminated. The second piece, though, in terms of the interior of the building, in anticipation of perhaps the remote chance, we hope, of having an intruder in the building and wanting to keep our children safe, out of harm's way, out of view of windows. If you walk through Julia Bancroft, you will see in designated spots in every room a smiley face. And that is the result of walkthroughs on several occasions of looking at our floor plan and thinking about strategically if someone were to intrude, would be least likely to be able to see the group of children in that classroom. And we anticipate that by mid-year or 3/4 of the way through the year, they in fact will run a drill to see whether or not we can do a simulation and make sure that the instantaneous response will be on the part of teachers and students to go to that safe area. The other initiative certainly being brought for them, which we have certainly welcomed, we always talk about the fact that our doors are open to everyone, and particularly parents, and we never want to in any way convey a message that is off-putting and uninviting. But nonetheless, safety being what it is, we have put into place also that all visitors entering the school must offer identification and turn that piece of identification, presumably a driver's license or something with a photo ID, to our school secretaries, keep that for the duration of the visit, and then have a badge. The badges have been color-coded by schools so that you can identify which school you find yourself visiting. And I must tell you, much to the credit of our community, of our parents, of the people visiting our buildings,
we have found that that initiative has been very well received. I think initially it just provoked questions. You want what, and what if I forget? And we have had several people forget and have to come back and pick up their licenses. But by and large, it's been very well received, which has really certainly made us feel as if we're all on this same page working together. The other piece of that, in terms of substitute teachers, we have recently been involved with an initiative at the behest of Dr. Brunel to try to see whether or not we can bolster our numbers of substitute teachers in the district. They've gone through trainings and certainly are becoming much more conversant before they come into our classrooms about what our protocols are for safety. And so, for example, if you're a substitute, you have a separate ID as well. In addition to the fact that our teachers are expected, our staff members, to wear their IDs so that anything out of the ordinary would certainly be striking to a visitor or someone who is a safety official coming in the building and wondering, and who are you and why are you not identified in some kind of a badge? So we look forward to that, and again, we'll look forward to that simulation, practicing first with children the fact that this is just a little test to see whether or not you can find the smiley face and go to where you need to be, just be quiet and very still for just a few minutes.
Just as education is about learning and safety, it's also about connecting to the community. And that's where service learning comes in. And we are very fortunate to have received our second grant this year from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And our grant is considered a continuation grant. Our grant this year is for $7,000 with the actual goal in mind, as far as the Department of Education is concerned, of weaning away from the department's money and the money from Learn and Serve America to incorporating service learning in our own operational budgets, or just simply incorporating it into our curriculum practice. So we are very happy that we're able to receive this continuation grant. Currently we have about 12 mini grants that have been submitted, and our advisory committee will be looking at those grants next week, as a matter of fact. And so we hope to get those launched and get those going very shortly. And I think that you will find that these mini grant proposals really are very creative. And the thing that is so exciting about them is that they really promote student engagement at its highest level. And that's one of the exciting things about service learning. So you are able to really reinforce student engagement, but also maintain that degree of rigor and relevance in terms of curriculum and in terms of academia, and not just be doing something frivolous that you think is going to serve the community, but you are addressing an actual community need while really investing into the skills of your particular curriculum. So we look forward to sharing more details about our service learning projects with you at a future date.
The last thing we're going to talk about as far as initiatives for FY10 is maintaining the extended day programs that we have in each of our schools. You folks all know better than I that this summer the satellite programs made the move to be building-based, similar to the Galaxy programs at Packagug and Julia Bancroft. I have to say that I'm happy to report that after a short period of adjustment, as we ironed out the logistics of the two programs, two satellite programs, the logistics of space and storage and routines, I think Mrs. Haggerty would agree with me that both of these programs are now at home in our primary schools. Each of our after-school programs is successful by design. They have some similar components. Snack time, always popular, outdoor time or gross motor time in the gyms, homework sessions, playtime or downtime with friends. Each of these programs also has committed to maintaining special activities, seasonal crafts such as papier-mâché pumpkins or gingerbread houses, participation in service learning projects, to echo some of the things that Mrs. Haggerty was said. Mary D. Stone School Satellite Program completed Holiday Mail for Heroes this December, where greeting cards were designed and sent to military personnel. At Bryn Mawr, in the fall, pumpkins were decorated for senior citizens. Keychains were designed for the residents of Stoneville Heights by Julia Bancroft, and Packagug ran a drive to collect items for our soldiers. So again, there's that involvement by our students and the connection to the community. We've also been able to involve our parents in our after-school programs and get their feedback so that our programs continue to meet the needs of families. We used a parent survey earlier in the fall, and each of our schools scheduled parent forums so the parents could give us the feedback and input about how to maintain these programs, how to continue to grow them, and how to provide safe, fun after-school care for our children. We're going to segue now, let's see if we can do this, to talk a little bit about the individual budgets at these different schools. On a personal note, I would like to just start out by thanking Dr. Brunel and Mr. Dede and all the members of the leadership team for their help in acclimating me to the budget process of the Auburn Public Schools. It's a little different in all districts. What we're going to do is give you some brief remarks from each of us about our specific building-based budgets. I think that all of us this evening would agree that the overarching theme is maintain, maintain, maintain. First of all, we are all very committed to keeping in place, first and foremost, our dedicated teachers and assistants. And your line right up here, teachers are your front line, we certainly heartily agree with that. Secondly, we're committed and dedicated to maintaining the programs and materials that have proven time after time, year after year, to be successful with students and their achievement. Keeping in mind the fiscal reality that confronts us, however, we have had to make some choices. And one of the choices that we made this year that was a little difficult was to postpone the implementation of a new phonics program across the 4 elementary schools to provide consistency in the delivery of that instruction, and also as students might move from district to district or as they move up in the grade levels. It is our intent with that postponement that this program will be a priority for FY11. So as we go through our budget today, I think you're going to see some similarities. This is truly a team of principals that are working together with the thoughts of students and their achievement, and also supporting each other as we go through these processes. You're also going to see some differences. Each of our schools has a personality of its own, a climate of its own, strengths of its own, and weaknesses in areas where we need improvement. And so you will see just some differences as we go through. What I'd like to talk about first this evening is just to give you some information about our class sizes for FY10. And at Mary D. Stone, there really are not going to be any huge discrepancies in the class sizes going forward. Our second grade class next year is going to have, currently it has 89 students. That's a class size of about 22 to 23. And our first grade class is very similar with 85 students currently, class size 21 to 22 students. According to some census data that we have, we are anticipating a kindergarten class of approximately 75 students. We anticipate that our full-day rooms will again be around 22 or 23 students, with the remainder being split between our half-day session in the morning and afternoon. These numbers, of course, are always fluid. Families move in, families move out, and generally we may see an increase or a decrease, but I think we're pretty close here with the numbers that I've just given you. I will also mention for the Mary D. Stone budget for FY10 is that we do not anticipate we have no new positions in our budget, except for one, and that's an ABA assistant, which is required by an IEP for an individual child. So that is in there. Very briefly, I'm going to go through very quickly. I think you probably all know this, but office supplies, classroom supplies, textbooks, library materials, audiovisual guidance, physical education, art and music items.
You said there's no new people at Mary D?
No.
Because in the budget, I see an increase of 2.5.
It should be just a 1.0. It's the, through the chair, it's the full-time ABA.
Right, but it's, where is it? Does it say 2.5?
Right here, on this page. Sorry, I'm looking, it says increases of 2.5, one for art and one for music.
That was the required budget.
That was a requested
That
item.
was requested.
Oh, okay. Okay,
That was the
sorry.
original budget that was submitted back in early December. Those positions were reduced and cut which brought us to the Economic Times
Okay.
position. So if you look at that final column, you should see just the ABA that Mrs. Chase had mentioned.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No
Just trying to
problem.
reconcile our books to...
Certainly, certainly. In our office supply category, you certainly know that we're ordering things like tape, pencils, printing materials, paper clips, file folders, the kinds of things that we need to run the school and the office on a day-to-day basis. The next category really is a little bit more substantial, and that is the classroom supplies. These are the things that we need to do our job in the classrooms every day. It might include things like the literacy folders, or the agendas and planners for our students, desktop helpers, the quick word dictionaries that the students will use as they're doing their writing and reading, theme tests, things that we need to refurbish year after year in order for the teachers to plan and deliver instruction. Our textbook category is zero line item this year. The next category on the slide is our library budget. And I've been able to maintain, or at least hold on to some monies there. I think it's important to keep developing the collection that we have. I'd also like to add some magazine subscriptions to the students, for the students, and also some basic reference books that would be appropriate for the primary level students. Our audio-visual, yes.
I just got a question on printing supplies, why it was zero and now it's 7,700.
The printing supply line was originally incorporated into our classroom or instructional materials. Mr. Dede requested in the organization of the budget that we pull those printing materials out and have a separate line item for them.
Thank
So
you.
that includes our, our toner, or our Rizzo
Right.
Masters, our paper, that kind of thing.
Thank you.
You're
Through the
welcome.
chair, if I may, and I apologize, you won't, the position that Mrs. Chase has talked about will be based at Mary D. Stone. However, that position, the 1.0 FTE, is based in the pupil services budget. So you'll see under Mrs. Chase's budget that there are no new positions for that building,
The ABA.
the ABA, but it's in the pupil services, that's what it's listed.
Appropriately, right.
Going down to the next category of audio-visual, this is where we replenish our overhead bulbs, our in-focus projector bulbs. We need a battery for our digital camera, that kind of material. We have very limited funds in our guidance line. That really is to allow our guidance counselor to purchase maybe some books, some games, some materials to facilitate the social skills and friendship groups that she runs. And our physical education, art, and music, there really is only money in the art line item, and that again is to replenish items and materials that are used year after year for their art projects.
Okay, I know you wanted questions at the end, but I think it would be best if we did it after each
Yeah.
school, because if we write notes, it would be hard to go back. So, does anybody have any questions about this?
I do, thank you. And perhaps you've explained it and I just missed it, so I apologize.
Go right ahead.
If you look at the positions for Mary D. Stone, under the specialists, you have reading. You have one FTE at 45,000, and it jumps to 72. I don't understand that.
Oh, yeah, that's what
I believe, well,
Actually, if I may, through the chair,
I know the answer to this, go ahead.
that was the budgeted amount put in last year because it was a retirement. And what happened was someone else from within the school, a veteran staff member, moved into that position. So the position that she left was taken by somebody else. So, just this year, as we're projecting those 5 retirements that we had discussed on Saturday, you will see for each of them, for example, some of them were from the middle school. It shows their salary for FY9 as perhaps the $72,123. Their projected salary, and that this is in the middle school where we've got the retirements, for next year is the $45,146. We're projecting that we'll replace them with a teacher with less years experience and less pay. Last year, when they did the prediction that they knew they would be hiring a new reading teacher, what ended up happening is someone from the staff currently who's at the top of the scale, moved into that position. So that's why you see.
So they got like a double, like their salary
No,
doubled?
no, the person's salary would have been that same amount wherever she was placed. She simply left a classroom position and became the reading specialist.
Oh, okay, thank you.
So the savings would have been realized in the
the
classroom.
I was just
Class.
gonna say, so-
Exactly.
so the class.
You
the
realize it
class
elsewhere.
reduced. Okay.
Right.
Okay,
You would have seen it elsewhere.
okay,
Yes.
thank you.
No, anybody else? Okay, I have a question, and now I just moved my page, so I gotta go back. Give me a second, please. In your classroom supplies, I'm sorry if you said it and I didn't get it, but I know you have math books that you have to replace every year because children write in them. Is that where those books are in classroom supplies? Is that what I heard you say? Okay, so they're because they used to be in textbooks, and that's what I was. We're moving everything around, so, and rightly so. I don't have a problem with it. I just want to make sure I know where things are.
Through the chair, that is correct. Historically, those items were in a textbook line item. However, they are more appropriately categorized as a consumable, and thus the cost has been shifted to the classroom supplies line item.
Okay, and then I really appreciate the fact that you told us about the phonics program, because one of the things that I'm really interested in is what we are not going to be able to do next year because we have to hold the budget. I heard you say that we'll put it off until 2011, and I'm not sure that, will the climate be any better? I don't know. My question is, because I think that it's important, even though I don't want to give you false hopes here, but I think it's important for us to know it, and you won't have the exact figure, but do you have any idea how much a phonics program would cost?
Each one of the principals had budgeted $4,000 in their building-based budget somewhere along the line for that. We are in the process of looking at different phonics programs to see which one really would fit the bill for all of us at all the grade levels. And this work is really being done by the literacy focus group that Mrs. Haggerty spoke of under Dr. Brunel's guidance. So a good approximation would be approximately $4,000 per building to put this new program in place. Right now, I don't want anybody to think we're not teaching phonics or that we're not delivering that instruction. We certainly are. But each one of us is using a little bit of a different kind of program, and so that has some issues for kids as they transition up through the grade level. Certainly students going from Mary D. to Packagug, and then, it's a different program, a brand, So there's some adjustments there, and we want to be on the same page with it. So I think
It
it's
is
about
difficult
4,000.
if a child moves from one side of town to another.
Absolutely.
I experienced that, and it is very difficult for a child to catch up. So you're talking $4,000 per school, and you talk so much about your literacy initiatives, and so is that, I know I heard what you just said, that you're teaching phonics, but is it really hampering the way that you can move forward? You've got such an initiative going here that I'd like to hear a little bit more about the phonics not having this year and what that means.
My colleagues to come up and please
add something. As my colleague, Mrs. Chase, has indicated, we are teaching phonics, but through different means. And certainly the Houghton Mifflin program, which we are using for our reading, / literacy, does include a phonics component. But it's a phonics component that we're not totally thrilled with. We're thrilled with the book itself, but it doesn't really address phonics in the manner that we would like it to address. For example, in depth as much as we would like. So actually, Mrs. Lozay had compiled a whole list of phonics programs for us to look at, and we were at that next step. We were at that juncture before the budget discussions came into play, and so. As Mrs. Chase had mentioned, we had put in the $4,000, but several of us have had prior experience with different phonics programs, and we were going to explore some of those. And for some students, the idea of phonology is not that much of a big issue. Some children don't need as much phonology practice as other children may need it, but it is the building block, and it is one of the 5 components of reading, which is really crucial. Mm-hmm. So let's just put it this way. We were disappointed that we were not able to pursue that particular avenue. Doesn't mean that we're not going to teach phonics. We're going to continue teaching phonics, but everybody will continue doing it in their own manner, using Houghton Mifflin as the basis, but perhaps some other smattering of other programs that people are familiar with. And that's where we kind of are.
Wayne?
I believe at the last meeting, Ron had come up with an idea of making a list.
Yes.
I would like to add that to that list.
Yeah, I think we are, I think
Absolutely.
Dr. Brunel
I
is
just
well
wanna make
aware of the
sure.
fact that
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You know, and I'm going to say, for what it's worth, I mean, you know, if a child has difficulty reading it, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know, if a child has difficulty reading, it affects them in every subject, including math. I mean, every subject. And so that's why I really wanted you to talk about that a little bit, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other questions? And I will just echo what Mrs. Chase has said and my colleagues have said. This is a maintenance budget, it's not a growth budget. I will walk you through some of the items that are in each of these accounts. First, I'll start with my enrollment for 2010. At this point, we're looking at approximately 23 to 24 students at the 3rd and 4th grade levels. Incoming grade 3 will be 94, grade 4 will be 95. And at the 5th grade level, we'll have 79 students with a class average size of about 20 to 21 students. So we seem to have a burst for a few years, but it sounds like Mary D is setting up smaller amounts in the future. Our staffing will remain the same this year as it was, except for the loss of one ABA and the addition of one IA. The ABA will be moving to the middle school, and the IA is coming up from Mary D, and I think that's all reflected in Mr. McInerney's budget. We have the same sorts of materials that we need at each of the schools. There are a few little differences. In terms of office supplies, that's where we have our student planners for our students that we put under there, our postage, our subscriptions, and again, the all-encompassing printing supplies. That was moved, as we talked about earlier, and again, that's toner, ink, discs, and paper. Under classroom supplies, this is not only just the daily nuts and bolts, such as your paper, pencils, crayons, but as Mrs. Gribbins had stated, it involves the consumable pieces of our core academic programs, such as at Packagug, we have the Right Traits workbooks, the social studies workbooks, the QAR workbooks, some student math journals, and our annual subscription to A to Z Learning for the teachers that supplement our reading program. We have decided this year to hold off for just a year. We had started a renewal cycle of math manipulatives, marker boards, clocks, centimeter rulers, and geotemplates, things that the students use often and they get worn. A few years ago, we set in place kind of a renewal cycle. We have agreed that we can make do with what we have, that there's enough and they're in decent enough condition to continue. Under textbooks, we have a very small amount there, and that is so that we can purchase some additional math reference books because our numbers have increased at those 2 grade levels. In the future, we will look to add some leveled readers under that line item. In terms of the library, we have chosen for this coming year to just rely solely on our PTO-sponsored book fairs and the donations to the Birthday Book Club. We feel that for 1 year, this will not compromise our library. Our library's in a pretty good place right now. Under audio-visual, again, like my colleagues have said, it's just really to replace bulbs and overheads or our in-focus projectors or camera batteries. Guidance account, just a smidge bigger than it was last year, and that is to help us begin to implement the PBIS program that I spoke to you earlier in terms of our reinforcers and to allow for some social skills and divorce group work. And our art is the same as it was last year, and this is just to replenish our art supplies. Do you have any questions?
Okay. Sorry.
They don't mind.
No, that's why I
remember
said it. I'm
standing
sure
there,
Yeah, we were waiting for Mrs. Haggerty, that's right.
All right, if you're falling asleep, I'll just, I'll give you a little nudge of something.
Never.
A few weeks ago, I was quoted by Teresa in the Auburn News, and my quote was something to the effect of, my primary concern is staff and not stuff. And that's reflected in my budget, that's sort of the mantra for all of us this year. My enrollment is actually going to be As far as the total enrollment goes for next year, I envision it being a few students less than it currently is. However, I see the increase being with our kindergarten children. And based on the census, the numbers will be increasing at Bryn Mawr, actually. So we potentially could go from 78 students that we currently have to possibly 84 next fall in kindergarten. In first grade, our numbers could go from 82 to 78. And in second grade, our numbers will decrease slightly, 86 to 82. And those are really just approximations for next year, because over the summer, lots of things happen. And you could have even half a dozen children walking through the door a week before school starts, or even the day school starts. Oh, school starts today? I guess we'll enroll. So my enrollment looks like it's going to be around 244 students for next year. And as far as staffing, I just want to explain and clarify perhaps a few things that might have been little red flags for you. I'm not sure. Everything is going to remain the same with a few minor changes, and one being through the collaboration and graciousness of Mrs. Goldstein, actually, she and I have come to an agreement. And for the longest time, actually ever since I came to Bryn Mawr, I kept thinking, gee, this doesn't seem fair. Why is the guidance counselor a .4 in my school and a .6 at Julie Bancroft? So now that Mrs. Goldstein is here and we get along famously, I said, gee, why don't we just separate this equally and have a .5 FTE for me and a .5 FTE for you? Our numbers are very similar. Our needs are similar. We would just like to make the availability of our guidance counselor similar. So that's what we are proposing, to have our guidance counselor be .5 in each of our buildings. Certainly, now mind you, if there is a problem, and both Mrs. Goldstein and I are in total agreement with this, and we've done this actually. If there's a crisis or if there's an emergency in either of our buildings, and if our guidance person, let's say, happens to be in my building and Mrs. Goldstein needs her, well, certainly she goes up there. So it's not an issue, and I just think it actually makes sense. So that's what we are proposing. The other issue is in terms of special education, and I know this was reflected in the pupil services budget and Mr. McInerney's budget. Our ABAs are going to remain at 5. And as you know, the program at Bryn Mawr is quite intensive, and I welcome you to come visit us at any time, but we are trying to service the needs of those especially challenged children. So we do have 5 ABAs currently on staff, and we will need 5 ABAs for next year. The difference will lie in the fact that because of several of our students who are currently in second grade moving up to Julia Bancroft, we will no longer need 6 special ed instructional assistants. We will only need 3. But the hope is, and the concept would be that these 3 people would be moving on to, other schools in the district to fill their needs. And I think that's it actually for changes. So as far as the operating budget is concerned, my office supplies are somewhat less this year than they were last year. I'm trying to tighten my belt as well. Classroom supplies, you will note that they have increased. And again, I know you understand this by now, and this is the 3rd time around, so I'm sure you get it. The fact that we have now absorbed our textbooks into the classroom supply line item. So that's why my classroom supplies look so much larger than they did last year. And I have zeroed out my textbook account. And I will tell you, Mrs. Gribbins, I'm going to tell you what I wanted that I didn't get, or that I'm giving up. I was hoping to put in $2,000 in the textbook account for RTI purposes, actually, for response to intervention, so that I could add some leveled readers. Mrs. Lozay mentioned the concept of leveled readers, but those leveled readers are little readers, fiction and nonfiction, that enable you to provide more reading material for your reading groups. And so through the concept of RTI with the 3 tiers, I was hoping to do that, but I decided, we have a sizable amount of leveled readers, and we also utilize, just as Mrs. Lozay mentioned, we utilize Reading A to Z, which is a wonderful, actually it's a wonderful software, not a software program, but you get it online, you have to subscribe to it, and you can download countless and thousands of little books that are either decodable text or they're leveled readers, and so we have several subscriptions for that at our school as well. So that kind of fills the gap for that particular need.
Can I just ask you something about that?
Yes.
But then don't you have to print them out?
Yeah. Yeah, you do. So then
So
that's
you're printing
the
supplies?
printing costs will go up. Yeah, the printing costs will go up. So I guess it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, isn't it? Yeah, good point. My library supplies I've brought down to zero this year because for the past 2 years since I've been here, I feel that we've addressed a lot of the library issues, and I've been gravitating around the same amount the first year I was here and the second year. So I think our library is in somewhat decent shape, and I too will rely on our PTO, who have been very generous as far as the book fairs and the raffles and so forth. And I've already told them, I've already forewarned them that this is going to happen, so they know. My audio visuals account line item, I reduced it somewhat. Totally feasible and totally workable. I can handle that. I did cut my guidance account also, and that's because last year we did purchase several materials, both books, some CDs, some games to use with the children. And so this year my guidance line item simply reflects really 2 items. It reflects a filing cabinet, because we need a locked filing cabinet, which we do not have in the guidance office, and it also reflects some incentives that our guidance counselor can use with our children. So that's what that reflects. As far as the last bulleted item, PE, art, and music, I have never included PE and music in the budget, but I am going to stick with my line item for art. And the reason being, we certainly need to replenish art supplies, and I, being a strong proponent of the fine arts, really believe strongly in providing our children with materials that they need for the art program. We have a fantastic art program. I'm thrilled with our art teacher. She does a phenomenal job. So we're able to offer children both art integration, which combines curriculum themes with art, and where the art teacher is actually working with the classroom teacher on thematic units. And then we also offer some of our specially challenged children art therapy. So I don't want to shortchange the art budget, so the art budget will remain the same. Do you have any questions for me, or am I all clear? All clear? Excellent. Thank you so much.
And thank you for letting us know about the level readers. Thank you.
Okay.
I would just add one note to Mrs. Haggerty's comment about art sharing. Yes, absolutely, because we really have worked together. We also have made sure that Mrs. Jarvis has a cell phone. Right. To be on call. In summary, you notice our lines at JB, our representative of my colleagues. Office supplies, if Nancy Murphy, our secretary, were here, she'd say Mrs. Goldstein cannot have enough binder clips, especially when it comes to student agenda books, to help them organize their materials. And so our office supplies, classroom supplies, sometimes merge in rather interesting ways in items like that. Office supplies are fairly austere, to be honest with you. Again, much to her credit, Mrs. Murphy is an incredibly organized individual who keeps tabs on things and tries not to ever be extravagant in terms of being wasteful. And so we recycle things and we try to really be judicious in our spending, and she's very adept at inventories. Our classroom supplies, my line is increased perhaps relative to others in that it also does include those consumable materials. And there had been a bit of a void prior to my arriving, and so that would explain some of those materials in terms of classroom supplies. In terms of textbooks, again, a zero line based upon the fact that the consumables are embedded in the classroom supplies. Last year, you'll remember that I came to you talking to you about the library at Julia Bancroft School, and I'm happy to report that we are moving ahead with our efforts, as earlier indicated with BayPath. We're awaiting a CAD drawing representation of what we think will be the location of the library. We've done some pretty comprehensive work in terms of trying to really think through this and make sure that it's situated in a way that it will provide access for people and also serve multi-purposes and still be protected from any potential leaking pipes, as perhaps all too often we find happening at our old building. But I would say also in terms of the library, you'll remember that I talked about the fact that it really, sitting between the two buildings in the basement of that old building, it really is the connecting piece, and we wanted to have it be centrally located. Mr. Markey is chairing a library renovation committee, and so working very closely with our community liaison, Kim Harmon, who's on our school council. We will be looking at replenishing materials in the library. But you'll remember that through the efforts of the PTO, our Adopt a Book raffle, last year we had a very robust fundraiser, Be a JB Reader. So we're not going to look at great increases in terms of the library, but rely on the funds that we have already raised. the nominal amount that is in there really is about being able to keep card materials, and also to perhaps increase some degree the amount of periodicals that we have for students. Publications such as Stone Soup, a magazine to foster interest in writing and illustrating among our students so that they can see that they're not only readers in that library, but they are would-be authors and illustrators. And we will certainly keep you abreast of where we are in terms of our timeline for the library. In terms of audiovisual, yes, I would echo what my colleagues said. Those bulbs are incredibly expensive for those machines. But to your question earlier about what would we give up, I would say that that connection between audiovisual and the overhead projectors that we use and the use of technology in terms of the projection machines, there will be a strong connection between that and the technology as we try to advance the use of technology to support learning. So although that may not be reflected in this year's budget, I would assume that in my mind, for JB, I would want that to tie a very close connection to our technology to bring that forward for learning in the classroom. Relative to guidance, we too have certainly kept that at a minimal, but again, with the PBIS grant, we want to be able to offer incentives. Mrs. Jarvis has rather an extensive list of groups with whom she works, one of which is an organizational skill. We have some struggling students whose greatest impediment to learning is the fact that they're not organized.
I have one.
And it's very interesting in the times of day that she meets with them to try to see whether or not she can develop within them the habits of mind to be able to, just piece by piece, in very small incremental ways, develop the habits that will make them much more successful, because they have great potential if they can just turn the corner in terms of that effort. I would expect that the guidance requests that I would have for you this year would be different than next year also for one other reason. Part of what I would really like to talk about even more with you at some future date would be the conversations that Mrs. Jarvis and I keep having about wanting to create a parent center at Julia Bancroft, a room where we have so many volunteers who come in. I want them to have a location. I want them to be housed at Julia Bancroft. I want to somehow, and I don't have any idea how I'd like to do this, somehow to find a space in that building that is the parent space. I'd like it to have a telephone. I'd like it to have a table where if they're going to collate materials, they can do it there. I'd like it to have a library of magazines and documents and newsletters, perhaps, for various things that they can access as parents in terms of educational effort. I'd like it to be a place where they can gather materials, and if they're working on a project, they can house things there. Right now, they are so itinerant as they work in the building. And I remember last year when we were doing the BAJB Reader Incentive, they were putting up into those hives throughout that entire lobby every day, pieces that had been cut out. And it was so portable as they carried in aprons, their materials to be able to tack up. And I kept thinking, they could have just gone to their central location in their parent center and been able to have lifted those. It would have been much better. And again, I want it to be a space. And I think, sometimes when you come to your room, I liken it to perhaps children of ours when they move on to college. If you come back and your room is no longer your room, but it's become mom's office or dad's, whatever, it makes you just pause and think, well, do I have a place here anymore? I want it to be the opposite. I want it to be that parents feel as if they have a place at JB. And space, I think, defines whether or not you feel as if you're really part of that community. And I want them to have a space there. So I would anticipate that I will be asking for more funds to see whether or not we can do that. In terms of PE, art, and music, I would echo what Mrs. Haggerty, my colleague, said. I see such a link constantly, and our teachers certainly do. They don't need to be drawn to it. They just see it themselves in terms of the connections and how they can influence curriculum. So whether it's through PE or art or music, those connections are always there. And I see that that would mean that beyond the programs that they are trying to do, particularly in art, to enhance their budgets so that when teachers have requests or they see that a teacher is working on a particular unit and they go to the teacher and say, gee, I think we could maybe do this. Case in point, in the lobby right now is a board that was reflective of a colonial American unit that our fifth grade teachers did. And the art teacher saw a great way to see whether or not she could show the students the art of penmanship that played out. And so what you would see in documents, historical documents, would look very different than the typed manuscript that we would see today or the handwork. And she actually had them
working almost in a Palmer method of creating those swirls and what have you. And so it authenticated for them the experience of that colonial way of doing things in terms of fine art of handwriting.
They didn't text back then?
It took longer to get whatever you were writing delivered to someone else. Right? And again, I see that as an effort to be able to integrate our staff. So we don't have a distinction between our specialists and our classroom teachers, but we are all colleagues working together to support learning of students. Do you have any questions? I would say then, let me bring us to our last slide. And while we take a look at this, I'm going to state it, mindful of current economic conditions, we are, among the four of us, committed to judiciously using a lot of town funds, designing our costs to support the 5 strands of the district's strategic plan, and maintaining our vision of excellence. And toward that end, we would thank you because we know we rely on you to share that vision with us. I know that you too will make judicious decisions, however hard they may be, to support what we both believe is most important in this town. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions?
Thank you.
I have Leanne.
No questions, but just a comment. I would like to just echo what I've been saying the last couple of presentations. Thank you very much. I know this was a painful process that you had to go through, and I appreciate everything that you're doing in your schools, and just thank you for doing the best you can with what you have. I appreciate that.
Janie?
I have a couple of things. First, I'd like to thank you too, and to applaud you for the cooperation across buildings. It wasn't too long ago that we looked up and, we weren't even using the same reading programs on different sides of town, and it just seemed like, the kids on one side of town were getting a different experience than the kids on the other side of town, and we really perceived that inequity, and it really bothered us, and it's nice to see that a lot of that has been alleviated, and that that's doing no short order to your cooperation, and I really appreciate that and applaud that. One of the questions I have, and it's probably more for the superintendent, in light of some of the issues that we have with the MCAS at the middle school, I know we've talked about this again and again, and I listened carefully to your math program and the everyday math. I'm going to ask you again though about the everyday math. And this is, again, just because of things I've heard comments. I've heard, I know a teacher in Worcester who tells me it works well for students that are fairly proficient in math, but not so well for those that are having trouble. I've had students at the middle school tell me that, for instance, with division, they learn to do division one way with the everyday math, and then when they get to the middle school level, they do math differently, so that transition is difficult because the change is not just incremental, it's a new way of doing things. And so I heard I did hear, we're going to talk with Mr. Hanfield about integrating, the K through 12 curriculum, which is welcome, and I know when we read the strategic plan, that was a big piece of the strategic plan. But I'm just wondering if in this budget and in the initiatives that we've seen, if there's something that you have going on that you can tell us about making that transition from the grammar schools to is that still a proper term, or do we use elementary schools now? Elementary schools now to the middle school, in particular with math, and in particular with an eye towards alleviating the difficulties that we have with the math MCAS scores.
Mm-hmm. I think that, and I certainly feel free to jump in at any time if you would like to, but Mrs. Haggerty had mentioned the curriculum committee that will soon be established. Mm-hmm. And if I can step back even a little further from that, on January 27th, when we meet as a professional development committee, one of the priorities that I plan to undertake with the group on that day is certainly we're going to have discussions about professional development, but I want it to be linked with curriculum and student achievement. I think we always have to be bringing it back to that. And I would anticipate that whether we complete it on our first day or in subsequent meetings this year is to create a curriculum cycle. So that way we know that we are focusing on, I don't think it's reasonable to think that we would, and I don't think there's an expectation that we would focus on all 5 or 6 different curricular areas every year. It would be, we would just, it would be making a wide swoop but not a deep swoop, and that doesn't make sense. So I think social studies is certainly one, but math has come up a number of times, even actually as an extension of the literacy focus group meetings that we've had. When the Everyday Math program was first put in, extensive time was put in and finding a program. We looked at a number of research-based programs at the time. And I believe it really has stood the test of time in terms of seeing benefits at the elementary level in terms of scores. So to that end, I think that we're on solid ground there. One of the points that you had made is the transition piece, and that's critical. And I, like you, applaud the 4 women before us tonight in ensuring that not only across this way is there consistency, but also as they move up the grades there is as well. And I think actually a middle school teachers, when I had met with them earlier this year, it had been brought up that they too are craving that transition, that communication, and those discussions. A number of years ago, and we talked about this a couple of times in the literacy focus groups, we had done, they were called the Utopia lists. And it was an activity that each grade level, and I believe it went up through the middle schools, was able to sit and say, there was an opening statement, something along the lines of, each child entering 6th grade should be able to these, 4 or 5 bulleted items for the ELA, for, and math. We focus primarily on English language arts and mathematics. And that was a very telling activity that happened because we were able to, teachers in 5th grade were able to see what does a 6th grade teacher expect coming in. So just as I think we need to focus on the transitions from 2nd grade to 3rd grade, those are somewhat easier to do because their schedules are somewhat closer in time. We need to make opportunities for the 5th grade teachers to meet with 6th grade. And math is a primary area, especially where there's concerns at the middle school through NCLB right now. But I would say that cuts across all levels. So do any of you want to speak of what you've seen in terms of successes with Everyday Math? I can speak about some that I remember having seen when I was here previously, but I think your more current experiences might be.
I've used Everyday Math in the last 2 years.
You need to come to the microphone. I'm so sorry.
I can hear you, but thank you.
I just think the Everyday Math program on the elementary level is the best program that's out there. And as a former curriculum director, I've researched them and visited people that are using different programs. It's just the best. And I think what's most telling is when your teachers come up to you and say, my goodness, I can't believe that kids coming into 1st grade can, count change, just the things that kids can do as they travel through the grades are surprising the teachers and veteran teachers that have been doing this forever. So I think that's the proof in the pudding, the things that kids are actually able to do. So I think the point is, though, that there hasn't been identified a really good, solid program anywhere along the line that has been able to bridge that transition. So I think we're constantly on the hunt for that program, and I know that there was talk at one time that Everyday Math would put one out, and I think maybe that's getting closer to fruition, but that's a little tricky. So I think it will take some work of those curriculum committees that Dr. Winnell talks about to make sure that those transitions go smoothly.
So I do anticipate doing, thank you, Mrs. Chase, the same thing that we're going to do with social studies with mathematics. And it could be that from the meeting on the 27th that it comes up as a concern from the teachers there. I really want it to be driven by those teacher representatives at the meeting of where we need to focus our attention.
But not to interrupt you, while I appreciate that,
Yep.
the MCAS, NCLB ding
Right.
is important to us. It
Right,
has
right.
to
And
have a lot of love.
it absolutely is. And I think that we have to ensure that we are addressing the needs of the students at every single grade, as they come to us. And also, having said that, as much as I believe in the Everyday Math program, one statement I'm very confident in making is there is no perfect program out there. In any program that you see, there will be deficiencies, for the lack of a better term, or areas where they are not as strong as perhaps another program. So do we need to perhaps look at, is there a a group of students who perhaps are not being as well served by this program, then that could be an issue that we would need to look at. But I truly believe that if we do a curriculum study and ensure that at each grade level they are focused on the standards set forth in the frameworks, which is what MCAS is testing, make sure that there's communication at those critical transition areas, and be sure that we've got the supplies and materials to address needs for students who perhaps may not be finding success in everyday math. And I make that as a generalized statement, not as a point of fact of information that I have. I think that we will see those scores go up. I actually anticipate that we will see a rise in the scores at Auburn Middle School. Those teachers are working very hard in doing those double classes and really trying to get at the core of the issue with students. So, but it isn't going to be an easy fix, and it isn't going to happen in a year or in 2 years, quite honestly. But it certainly is going to happen.
Can I give just a little bit of feedback on the everyday math as a parent, because I've now had 4 children go through it. It seems, I just wonder if at the end of 5th grade, the children need to perhaps, they've been, example, multiplication. They've been presented with various ways of doing multiplication. You've got the lattice, you've got the traditional, whatever. Does anybody sit down with students and say, okay, this one is the way that, maybe is the best? Or how did the kids come to the conclusion as to which one they need to use when they get up to the middle school? And I'm going to give you an example. There's 2 kids sitting down at the table, and the older child sees the younger child doing the lattice multiplication. And he said to my child, what are you doing? That's got to take a ton of time. And being in middle school, and he said, do it this way. And she goes, oh, well, I haven't done it that way in a long time. And he said, but just do it this way. It was the traditional way. And she says, oh my gosh, that's so much faster. And so that's the question I throw out, is that, I understand the different methods in trying to do different things when it comes to math, but at what point does a child say, this is probably the most effective way to do it? I don't know that much about it. I'm throwing that out, and maybe you're looking at me saying, that's a ridiculous statement, but it's one that I've experienced personally.
You're the last one to step back.
Yeah. With a lot of students, that does happen. It's mostly with the students that struggle that the teachers really see this approach is better, and they finally get them to, you just stick with this. With the other kids, I think that we want to expose them to all of it, because it's really a way to build the concept.
Absolutely.
If you only give them that traditional method right from the beginning,
absolutely,
you're not building the concept.
No, they through all those different methods, they understand why they're doing it, not just that they're doing it because.
Right. It's not rote and it's not automatic. And I guess I would say, I don't know how old your child was when the older one finally said, but that was the point, I guess. And everyone comes into it at a different point, and they realize, oh, wait a minute, this is the same thing. I mean, I do think our 5th grade teachers strive to try to get them before they go to middle school that this is the traditional method. However, you can rely on some of these others. So I think it's a comfort level, too, with the child. So, I mean,
I don't mean to get into a whole
no,
philosophical way of doing it.
Back, and maybe that we have to be more pointed to some of the children and say, okay, what do you think? Which of these are the best for you, or whatever. And I know we do that with some, but maybe we need to do it.
Because if a child's doing the lattice on an MCAS test, they'll never get
through that. Time.
Yeah. Well, one other follow-up to that, too. I think back to the statement I had made, and deficiencies is not the right word to use, but I'll stick with it because it's what I've already thrown out there. When we were using and implementing the everyday math program, the concept of the spiral as it continues through, and as teachers and as administrators at the time, we said the one area that seems to be lacking or is not as strong is on the acquisition of basic math facts so that they are actually automatic. And what we did is implement in expectation that there would be regular practice, both at home and in school, of math facts and development. Because when it comes down to it, yes, you can use the lattice, and it's a nice, it's an effective, strategy to use. But in the end, as you continue in your mathematical proficiency and development, you need to know. Ultimately, at some point, it comes that you need to know that 9 minus 7 is 2. and you need to
Right.
know it that quickly. So, but that was where we identified perhaps a gap and put in place something that we felt would fill it.
That wasn't a criticism, I was just giving you some. Any other questions? I have to say that I was sitting here thinking earlier that I've been through 10 of these now, which is really, Mrs. Lozay, how long have you been a principal?
Probably for all 10.
So, but you can relate when I say that when I first came on the school committee, each principal came up and did their own thing and sat down, and it was a very, one didn't really have anything to do with the next, you know, as far as the presentations went. So it's really nice that we've come to the point where we see the elementary schools as really one, because you are. It's just we're housed in 4 different places. So I thought the presentation was wonderful and very informative. Thank you.
I would say that, I guess I would say thank you for the work you do beyond what we normally would expect of principals. I think specifically of the work that you do in curriculum and how lucky we are to have you. And at the same time, you probably are your own worst enemy in that you're so successful at doing it for us. It's been, 3 years now that we have said we need someone for curriculum, and we've taken it off as we get nearer to the final magic hour with budgets. There aren't many systems in central Massachusetts that don't have a person specifically authorized to do curriculum in a district. And, you know, again, we are fortunate that you have the expertise you do, but it gives you extra work, and I thank you for doing it so willingly and so well.
Wayne?
I would like also to say you did a great presentation, and with the curriculum director there, I wasn't in support of two of them a couple of years ago, but I was in support of one. And I understand the need for them. And as Ron was just saying, I mean, at this time right now, with the budgets the way they are, we can't afford one. But you people have stepped up to the plate and made sure that our kids are going to be educated and taken care of in a time of need that we are now with our fiscal problems. And I want to thank you for stepping up too. And hopefully in the future, when times get better, that we can get a curriculum director set up. And I just want to thank you.
I think we need to.
We actually, if you remember, Mr. Page, in the presentation on Saturday, we are going to, with restructuring from the ELE teacher, that's going to be changed over to a curriculum coordinator. So it is in the budget for next year. There's no additional cost in the operating. We're going to support it additionally through school choice funds. So hopefully it's going to be realized next year.
Right, but it's just not going to be an added expense.
Correct. It's not going to be a brand new
But we
expense. You're
will
absolutely right.
be getting a curriculum coordinator, hopefully.
If I can just add, if you don't mind, a little piece, because something that one of the principals said really brought this to my attention, and I was making a few notes that, excuse me, in the operating budget, we're going forward with a budget that is less than level funded for FY9. And one of the reasons, and certainly appreciate the support that we do receive from the town as a school department, but one of the reasons that we are able to do this is that we rely on the support of others in the community, and primarily our parents. I was making some quick notes, and I think this was in reference to library books. I don't think that there would be any of us that would argue the point that children need to be exposed to rich literature and have it available to them. And thanks to our PTOs who raise money and do fundraising, and the students and families and they extend to, we're able to keep our libraries up to a level, certainly that they're not state-of-the-art libraries by any means, but we're able to offer to our students appropriate books for them to read. We have families in our full-day kindergarten that is able to happen because they pay a tuition for them to actually attend those programs. Our after-school program, unlike some area towns that are able to have a program that is funded through operational, it's a total fee-based program, and it's a rich experience as described by some of the principals here tonight. We send out to parents supply lists each year at the end of each school year and ask, these are the materials that, you could help us by providing these. So that's another expense that we turn over to others. Certainly, some might argue that field trips are experiences that aren't necessary, but they certainly enhance the curriculum. And if you look in the curriculum frameworks, they actually encourage trips to museums and other places. And those are funded primarily and probably almost exclusively either through PTO fundraising or through parents taking money out of their pockets. As a school district, we seek grant funding whenever possible. Some grants we simply are not invited to write because our community is not considered a disadvantaged community, or the fact that our MCAS scores, despite the challenges, but truly reflective of the work done by administrators and principals, our MCAS scores really are quite good when you look at the whole. And it's not unusual that there would be some areas of weakness here and there, and it's cyclical, and we will address those. But also, it was mentioned the other evening, I think, when Mr. Garno and Mr. Pietrello were presenting their budgets, that the area businesses also support our programs through whether they buy ads in program booklets that help to fund the games management so that we don't have to pay for those things out of operational. So it really is an effort that involves the school, clearly involves the home, and clearly involves the community that help to support that we're able to bring forward a budget, I think, that is less than level funded at this time, and still be able to say, while we will not be moving forward at the pace we would like, we are not going to stall the progress that we've begun here. The momentum that has really been created by principals and teachers and all of our staff members that work with our children.
Not to mention our teachers, who probably...
Did I not mention them? No, I didn't mention them. Oh, sincerely, our teachers, for all of them listening, they know I meant teachers. I think I said all of our staff members who work with students, but absolutely all of them, absolutely.
She's tired too.
I'm wheezing too.
And hopefully in 2011, the budget's better.
Yeah, let's hope. Let's hope.
Oh, boy. Okay. Is there any other questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you again.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay.
When we get to new business, I'd like to say something.
Okay. All right, under unfinished business, we have
I'm sorry, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Based on the budget? Do we want to, at this time, talk about a final number, like a
I'm
draft
sorry.
proposal like
should-
we had?
I'm sorry.
We talked about putting a draft
Yeah, I'm
proposal
I'm just
and
looking at the
moving
agenda,
that
and I'm not,
forward.
I'm going to the next thing.
Buzzing right through here.
Before
Let
we
me,
even talk about the
Yes.
whole number, we had said the other day, Saturday, to look again at the school committee dues line. We were gonna see if we could make an adjustment there.
right. Based on, you should have in front of you here, Mr. Didi had pulled this summary sheet for you that shows the dues line. Actually, Mr. Didi, why don't I have you speak to that?
Thank you.
Rather than me trying to.
To the chair, at the presentation, Saturday's presentation, as I was going through the central administration budget, I noted the school committee dues, the suggested number for next year was $15,000, which was commensurate with this year's number. I have an extra copy here, I can certainly pass along an extra copy too.
It came out.
And I did a quick review of the line item, and I had made a comment that we were averaging about $10,000 or $12,000 annually for expenditures, and as you see in the front page there, we're pretty much right on target this year. And we have a bill schedule. Actually, that number is slightly higher now. We have a bill schedule I just processed today and signed off on. There's an additional expense of $565 in there as well. We also look at the mask dues for next year, and what we were told is that we should anticipate about a 3% increase in that number. One of the numbers that's in here, though, that and it has been in here in the past, is the NEAS dues for the high school. And as Mr. Hanfield noted during his presentation, he has that figure in his budget. The long and short is certainly you could look at that and reduce that by $2,500 to $3,000 if you chose to do that.
Reduce it by 3,000, is that what you said?
2,500 to 3,000.
Okay. So do we have a recommendation from
I would actually make a recommendation that you reduce the school committee dues line by $3,000 to $12,000 for FY10, and believe that will sufficiently supply.
And what about the NEASC dues?
NEASC has been moved to
Right.
the high school, but the one item that you do see that's been expended from this year is the French River Education Center. That allowed us to be part of the group for the great oil price that we got in the electricity price. It allows us to get involved in the bids on all of our supplies and materials, including custodial supplies. So based on that, in reducing it, knowing that NEASC is covered in the Auburn High School budget, I believe $12,000 should be sufficient for
Can I
FY10.
just ask something about that? French River that obviously doesn't get into everything, and as we've read in the news, like there are other collaboratives that get into other things. Is it possible to join other collaboratives to buy other things, or once you're in the you only join one because whatever they agree to go after, you have to go after with that collaborative?
Through the chair, if I may, I'd like to answer that question.
Sure.
As things are run with French River. When we do the large procurement for oil or for classroom supplies, if you are a member of the collaborative, there is no charge. However, any community is welcome to participate in that procurement. There is a cost, however, that they pay to French River for that procurement. And if there are two procurements, that there would be an additional cost. I believe that number is a fluid number that would change from year to year. Historically, that has been, I know, for example, with oil, it's been about $300 per community. That if you want to be one of the 24 communities and you weren't part of the collaborative as a member, as a paying member, $3,000 worth, that you would pay them $300 to participate in that procurement.
Yes, and before we make this motion, can you think of other things that other collaboratives go after that it would behoove us to join them for?
Through the chair, I think one great example is probably the electricity. We got involved in that procurement actually going back to last spring, when ironically the Education Collaborative of Boston, EDCO, and also the Greater Lawrence Educational Collaborative, or GLEC, two of my previous collaboratives were involved in that procurement, and that gave me the impetus, if you will, to pursue that, and actually to partner with them, which brought us to eventually work with our current provider. I think that we're pretty much, through the chair, we're pretty much on target now in terms of our procurements for large items, i.e. the oil, the electricity. Again, we are in the process of looking at a natural gas provider again for next year. This will be our second year doing that. I certainly welcome, off the top of my head, I can't think of anything significant. Maybe one small item that I speak of every year, I don't have too many takers on, would be custodial supplies and materials. It seems like every district has their own method for pursuing that, different soaps and what have you. There is always the opportunity to access supplies and services on the state contract. where there are many vendors and items that we as a municipality and school district could at any time procure using that state contract.
I was just wondering if before we go, consider moving $3,000, if it might behoove us to leave some money in there so that if there was something, for instance, that another collaborative was going after that French River didn't, that we could keep the money in there so that we could join them so that overall we save more money.
Through the chair, yes, and again, Dr. Burnell, has recommended $3,000 to reduce, and I can only speak for French River and what they were charging. Some collaboratives, it's also a means for a collaborative to garner some outside revenues from districts that are part of the collaborative. So.
But you can't think of anything off the top of your head where you could say, oh, we should join, for instance, this Eastern Community.
ECHO,
ECHO or something, to go after, this type of supply or this type of product or this type of service. You can't think off the top of your head of anything like that, right?
Through the chair, not at the present moment. I think that we're pretty much on target with our large-scale purchases. And again, we're in the process of pursuing our E-rate for next year. But I'm certainly, if I can think of something, I'll certainly be happy to report back to Dr. Purnell and to the committee.
What would...
No, there was a motion and it was seconded
Yeah.
to reduce that line item from 15 to 12.
Okay, on the discussion part of it, what are we going to do with the money you're taking out? You're going to add that to your budget cut, or you're going to put that somewhere else?
It would be my recommendation to add that to the budget cut. So instead of having a reduction of $1,850, it would be a reduction of $4,850 below level funded, less than last year.
Okay, now we're going to send this number as a committee saying this is the number that we're standing behind. It's not going to be a draft?
No, this is going to be a
It's
draft.
got to be a draft.
It's gonna be the draft.
It's got to be a draft
Okay.
until you do,
I just
yes.
want to make perfectly
Yes.
sure.
Oh,
So
yes.
Yeah.
I made a
Yes.
vote last
Right.
year that I didn't
Okay.
agree with because I thought it was coming back and it never did.
Okay, no, this would draft,
This would be a draft.
Okay,
yes,
as long as we're sticking to that draft.
yes.
All right, but first we need to vote on the reduction on the school committee line.
Somebody made it?
Ron made the motion, and I thought you seconded
I
it.
seconded.
Yeah.
Okay, any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
So we should take this out and put this in?
And this one we
Just
changed.
put it on top of it.
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. Because this one was.
Yes,
ink cartridge.
Dr. Brunel handed out these two handouts, and I think we're going to need to have her explain those to us.
This is a quick snapshot, this one here, and Mr. Didi and Mrs. Turcott both helped in putting this together today. Just wanted to summarize for you, before you make a decision about sending a draft FY10 budget proposal forward. And again, it won't be an official number until such time as you hold your public hearing, which you'll just pick a date at the February meeting. But we will act, and actually we've made a further reduction from this one sheet. It'll now be a budget sending forward, assuming you vote so, of $20,584,542. So you've just reduced $3,000 from that on this small sheet here. What I had done in anticipation that you may go along with my recommendation, this budget page is actually what I would propose, assuming you go forward with this one. I'm being a bit preemptive, but that this would be the number going forward. But if you see here, what I tried to do is to encapsulate where we've come and how we've done this. That it is $4,850 less than the 2009 appropriation, and that's truly in recognition of the current challenging economic climate. In the budget that will go forward, assuming you vote in favor of this, to send forward the budget as you see it, and to show you here what I would suggest we do for ease of them, because you've had an awful lot of time in reviewing this and are very accustomed to the budget itself, but that the area which is listed, the FY10 economic times rate, that column in every facet of this budget would be highlighted in yellow. So referenced here would state that you see that a dual budget was created in a dual format. First one was the FY10 required salary or required rate, depending on the line, and then another column which was the FY10 economic times rate. So by highlighting that line, and that states that that was the recommendation of the leadership team and perhaps of the school committee to send forward for people's ease. And also to date on here that this would go forward to Mr. O'Connor, assuming a positive vote, and Mr. Kazanovich tomorrow, which would be January 15th. And then listing here publicly that the public hearing would be held on this draft budget proposal at some point in February, a date to be decided in early February by the school committee, and that all citizens of Auburn, it will be an open meeting, as all of our meetings are an open meeting, but that we would certainly extend a personal invitation to the town meeting members as well as the Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee. So just as a little summary of the process that's taken place to date. And I am pleased to report that all budget presentations presented before you, other than the one tonight, which will be on tomorrow, are online. And many updates have been made. Thanks both to Mrs. Otten and Mr. Bouvier for their efforts have been made to the entire website. If you've not visited lately, tomorrow or tonight, if you get home and can't sleep, would be a good time to do so.
Yeah.
Okay. Leanne?
Just, as Liz said the other day, I don't want to turn this into a love fest, but I just, again, Dr. Brunel would like to thank you and your whole leadership team on a very well thought out budget process. I, for the second time around, found this to be much clearer for me and much easier for me to understand than in the past. So again, I just want to tell you I appreciate that.
Thank you.
All the efforts
That could
of
also
your
be
staff.
because there was nothing new.
It did make it somewhat easier. And it did look easy, that due to the professionalism of everyone who presented this, made it really appear some of the pain had gone away in all of those discussions that we had, at least 4 of them that I can recall immediately when we sat and paired the budget. And then I said, all right, well, let's take it, we'll come back again and let's pair it tighter in recognition of the time. So, but it's a commitment on their part and all the teachers and staff behind them, that this is what they're willing to do.
Janie?
I just, part of the reason I think that this presentation was so much clearer than us is because I think in the past, we started off with that first column, what the leadership recommended, and then we'd say, oh no, you got to cut a little more, and then Dan would do that one in green. Then we'd say, oh no, you got to cut a little more, and then Dan would do that one in purple. And then, and like it would go on and on. Finally, by the 5th iteration, Dan had gone through all the colors in Excel, and and then we'd get to the bottom, and it was very confusing. This time, I think we went right to the bottom line. And so I hope that when we go to town meeting, people, as you said yesterday, so articulate, that people realize, if we have to go lower than this, and mindful, again, that we're below last year's budget in light of the economic times, and we want to do our part without really hurting the kids. I hope that people are mindful that if we go below that level, it could have some serious consequences for educational impact in Auburn. Right. And so, sometimes there used to be a mentality, I think, a long time ago, that, you shoot up here, and then they're going to shoot you down here, and then, but you can really live down here. That's not what this is about. This is, we're as low as we can go without impacting education. And I appreciate the fact that that was a painful thing for you to do.
Thank you.
And I have to say, in the 10 years that I've been doing this, I've never encountered a budget where there really was no growth. And so we're applauding Dr. Brunel for the process and coming forward with something that is fiscally responsible during these economic times. we should not be excited, and I'm not suggesting that anyone is, but there is no growth in this budget. And I think people do need to understand that although cuts would be much more painful, no growth is painful as well. Wayne?
I'd like to thank her too and her team that did this, and it's a very bad year. And hopefully we don't continue these as bad. I mean, we're going to have harder times here and there, but I mean, this is not just only affecting the school system, it's affecting the whole town as a whole. And, you know, I'd like to say as far as this goes, that it was very well done. It was very easier for me to understand, like Janie was saying about the different colors. I remember last year, biggest thing I seen on the bottom of it, I seen more things that said revised than I saw of a lot of other things. And I thought it was done very well. And I'm glad that this is, in my opinion, is going as a draft first. Because I misunderstood what happened last year, and I want to make sure that that's the way it stays. And I want to thank everybody because we have to do this. We don't have a choice. If the money was there, we could add, but we can't. And all people are suffering through this. And I want to thank you for the great job.
Thank you.
Can I ask you something too? How are we going to make, like, for people that aren't town meeting members, okay, is there a way for the public to see this in written form after it's
She's putting it on the website.
So the whole thing is on the website?
That would be my recommendation. Once you agree on the number, if this is the number, we're going to go forward with this, the $20,584,542, it would be my recommendation that, assuming your approval, that we'd highlight that and get it on the website tomorrow for people to access and be able to see.
In draft form?
In draft. It would clearly state that this is the draft proposal, but it would have every line item just as you see it, just as this book is here. Each page listed by school, by department of what they had requested would have the FY9, the FY10 required, which is what they had originally asked for, which is about a 5.6% increase, and then finally the FY10 economic times rate, which is the $4,800 less than level funded.
Excellent.
Wayne?
I hate to say this, but this may not be a final number because of the numbers that we're not getting.
Right.
And I heard today that Deval Patrick was looking for more power to
Yeah, well, that's why we're doing it as
cut
a draft.
things.
That's why we're doing it as a
I want to make
draft,
sure,
because
but I just want to make sure that, but we may have to look into this deeper as far as cut goes, and just hard to do.
It was disheartening news coming from the state level, without question.
Leanne?
Did anybody find out the vote?
Leanne?
I'm sorry. Dr. Bernal, I know you just said that you were, if we approve this, you're going to put this out on the website. Are you putting all of the other summaries and the, I mean, everything in here? It's not just the budget line items, but it's all the goals and objectives and the summaries, and did all the superintendents
We
had
could
written-
certainly do that. If that's your will,
I
you
think
could
it's
certainly do
important
that.
because that's the word I'm looking for, substantiates
Sure.
why they're asking for what they're asking for. I
Okay.
think it's very important to see what they've done and where they want to go. So I think all of that is important as well as just the number.
Right.
Okay. I do need a,
Motion.
I do need a motion. Send this number forward as a draft. Or this budget, I should say.
Don't you had the motion for the reduction.
Yeah.
I'll make the motion. I'll make the motion that we submit this as a preliminary budget. Is that the-
Draft budget proposal.
As a draft budget to the town. Again, with the caveat that after public meeting, it could be changed.
Right.
You need a dollar amount, $20,584,542.
And I will second that.
Okay. Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
To vote.
And we'll get those things up on the web tomorrow.
Madam Chair, I don't want you to suspend the meeting, but I just have to step out. I'll be right back. But go ahead and continue.
Okay. Anybody need a Sure, we can do a 5-minute break.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks,
I shall
Leanne.
shut down the...
This is the cost. right? I mean, so we're not making money on Auburn nonprofit groups.
Auburn
Is that a fair
nonprofit, we would be
statement?
covering our costs.
Okay, and so, so on some of these, I can see that these are multiples. So that's my first question. Okay, so I can see that most of these have some multiple of the cost for the for-profit groups.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Part of my question revolves around, for instance, let's say we have a classroom, we're telling a for-profit group is $25 per hour. Do we have minimums amount of times that they have to rent it for? Because in part, like I'm sure in the custodian contract, that there's, if we call them in, they work 3 hours or something like that. Are there minimums that people have to rent these for?
Through the chair, historically, no. I mean, if someone needed a classroom and they were looking at it for an hour, we would rent them that classroom for the hour. I can speak, though, typically, for the most part, like to Nichols College, and when they're at the high school, for example, they are there usually on a Tuesday and a Thursday evening for 3¼ hours each evening.
Well, I'm not against the chair. It's not. I'm not concerned about the people to do it for 3 hours because that's probably the minimum on the contract. I'm just saying, as this stands, somebody could feasibly come to you and say, I want that. Can I have the classroom for an hour on a Saturday at 3 o'clock or something? And I'm just wondering, if we were then in a position where we had to have a custodian work overtime and the custodian contract, and these are all just examples,
Sure.
said the custodian has to be paid for 3 hours, is there something that we can say, okay, you have to rent it for a minimum of 3 hours or something? That's
I think
my
we could
question.
certainly put that in there, but also Auburn High School in particular has coverage with custodians 7 days a week. So if someone was to come and wanted to rent a classroom for an hour on a Saturday, so long as it was and it was an Auburn nonprofit, that it was during a time that a custodian was there, it wouldn't be an issue. If it was going to go beyond that, they would have to pay the additional charge, which is the overtime charge, to have the custodian. So we're certainly not going to be in a position that we're losing, that we're paying money out of pocket to have coverage for that. That would be the person or group's responsibility.
Okay. Can I ask another question? Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
another question. So have we, I know there was question when the kids were in school about using things like the art and home economics rooms where the kids may have projects that are out. I see that there's a rental fee. So where are we with that while the kids are in class? I mean, while the school year persists, like, I've heard, some people want to run a cooking class or something like that, which would be great, except when the kids are in session. And
It wasn't just when kids were in session. I think part of that was because if there was something going on in that room, that a class ended the day, but things were not completed for that day, and they were coming back to it the next day. If you rented it out that night, you were now disturbing what had, the things that they needed for the next day.
That's when I meant in session, I meant during the school year.
Okay.
Oh, okay. I
That's
thought
what
you
I
meant.
meant. I'm sorry, I wasn't
you meant
clear.
you were renting it out while kids were.
No.
Sure.
Oh, no. I'm sorry.
Okay.
That was my fault. That was not clear.
In response to the chair, the issue has not come up yet, but I would say that first and foremost, each of our school buildings are the buildings in which we house educational facilities and classrooms and things like that. So if it was, in the different persons at the schools, and Mandy happens to be the one at the high school, when she is coordinating this, if someone was to seek to rent the home ec room, for example, and do some sort of a cooking class, it would be after checking with the person in that classroom there. So I don't ever want to be in a position that we are in any way inhibiting what would be happening in a classroom in order to rent for $20 or $30 or whatever the amount of money is. It simply wouldn't be worth it, because the educational program that is offered from 7:30 to 2:30 at the high school and at the other schools, their hours, that's the top priority. That's the primary function of those schools. So any of these rentals would always have to be done after consultation of what's going on in the classroom or the auditorium, if someone was to rent the auditorium and there was something happening, whether it was from the high school or any of the other schools that wanted to use that to do, Mr. Pietrello spoke about the elementary choral program that's going to happen, that would be given top priority in this always.
You see, but I guess what I'm trying to say is the auditorium is obvious, right? But for instance, an art room where the kids may have, I don't know, pottery projects hanging out, drawing or something like that, it might not be so obvious that that room shouldn't be rented while the kids' work is curing or whatever you do.
Sure.
Excuse my ignorance when it comes to artwork. While the kids' work is curing there, so it might not be so obvious. And that's my only concern is that I know Mandy's very good but I just want to make sure that that type of thing is taken into consideration when those spaces
That's
are
a good point.
considered for rental.
Sure.
I think that's what I worry about the very most is the art room, because I'm trying to visualize an art room and that space is sort of, it's all over it. And so how do you get people in there that aren't disturbing student work? So I would ask that just be discussed with the different schools and make sure that they even they would accept the fact that we would be willing to rent those rooms out. I'd have no problem taking the art room off of the fee schedule and say we don't rent our art rooms out.
During the school year? I mean, during the summer, but the kids aren't there during the summer?
I can see, but I don't have a problem. I don't think we're going to lose so much money from taking the art room off of the fee schedule if it means that we're not going to have any problems, so.
I just, as I go through this, that comes to mind.
Any other questions? I do need okay.
A question, I don't know if it's really relevant for this, but on the parking lot, you're charging people for parking lot. We have other people that are parking there at night. So does that mean we're going to be charging these people here, but not these other people that are going there? I don't want to really use their name at this point.
Okay. What I would say to you is this fee schedule is predicated on someone filling out a rental form. So if they've not filled out a rental form, in my previous district when I was an elementary principal, so a couple of careers ago, in Sturbridge, there would be groups, outside groups, not Sturbridge groups, who would want to rent the parking lot because the Pan Mass Challenge, for example, there were so many people who came, and there just simply was not enough parking there for that. So they only wanted to rent the parking lot, but I'm not aware of that circumstance of what you mentioned, Mr. Page, but this would be if someone came and for some reason needed to rent the parking lot. It wouldn't be that you'd have to rent the parking lot if they were using the auditorium. That would be part of the package. Oh, I don't know that what he's, okay.
I think what you're getting at is, so let's say that a carnival came to town. Not that we'd rent to a carnival, but let's say the carnival came to town and they wanted to use the parking lot. Then that's the fee you're telling them that they would have to rent the parking lot.
Correct.
But if a local business had people parking in our parking lot and weren't filling out the appropriate paperwork, then it's just, I mean, we have signs up, I assume we have signs up that say, that shouldn't be done. And
It's prohibited.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
That's basically what I'm trying to say.
I see, okay. People shouldn't be parking there without permission, I guess is the best way for me to say it, most generally.
So the parking lot fee doesn't apply to somebody who's using the auditorium and maybe bringing in a large group of people that could feasibly take up all our parking that day?
Through the chair, when we developed the schedule a year ago, it was the first time in I think a very, very long time that the district had looked at a pretty comprehensive schedule. So what I did at that time was to look at really every possible scenario within a building using data from neighboring districts to develop a fee. I think a good example of the parking lot fee would have been a couple of years ago when the Danskin event was held at the high school during the summer. And this was prior to this very to the implementation of this very comprehensive fee schedule. And for that 3-day event in the summer of 2007, I believe it was, this fee would have been an assessment to that rental agreement at that time, had we had a number then, because the activities of that day brought that group outside and were using the back parking lot of the high school.
But the assumption is if somebody rents the auditorium, they can park the cars there.
Correct, through the chair.
No, but there's
absolutely.
something, I guess there's something, if you've got a huge function going on that's that's going to be hundreds and hundreds of cars, and they're literally going to fill up your whole parking lot, that you've assumed that in the auditorium fee. So
Through
you're
the
not
chair,
putting it on
yes.
a different.
And
another-
again, I just go back to that example. I think that's what I was thinking of a year ago when we developed the schedule, is that one particular vignette where that activity was really throughout the grounds, inside and outside the auditorium, and there was no assessment for that activity outside in the parking lot.
What about groups, for instance, I don't know, if there's not that aren't necessarily school related, but are academically related? Do we give those types of groups the Auburn nonprofit rate? You understand, some of the groups, I can't remember the competition, what's the?
Yeah, the Destination Imagination.
For instance, Destination Imagination. They're not necessarily an Auburn nonprofit group, but they are an academic group, which encompasses our children.
Right.
Do you give them the Auburn nonprofit?
Yeah,
rate?
but what I would be careful of is anybody could make the case, that they
Well,
were,
That's true.
So you're kind of walking, I think if you just keep it very simple,
Okay.
that would be my feeling on it, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes
And leave
sense.
it to the discretion of the superintendent
Right.
on, okay,
Yeah,
all right.
thank you.
So do you need a motion on the fee schedule?
We do.
Yes.
I'll make a motion to accept the fee schedule as presented finally.
Second.
Any more discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
There'll be no dancing, that it's probably off the agenda.
Okay, we do have the superintendent's goals and evaluations update. That's been on there now for a couple of times at everybody's request, so does anybody have any? Leanne?
This is more as a curiosity factor than anything else, Dr. Brunel. Can I get a copy of the principal's checklist?
Sure.
And you said that also mirrors, so superintendent's checklist is the same thing?
Yes.
Or is it something different?
No, it is. I can give you a copy of both of them, and I have them electronically.
Yeah, it's a curiosity thing.
Sure.
I would just like to see those.
The Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed sends out a superintendent's checklist, and theirs has many, many items on it, some that need to be submitted to them, and some just as reminders to do. And actually, I started this checklist in my previous district for principals. I'm the type of person, I like to know not what's due today, I want to know what's due 2 weeks from today, so you're constantly in forward motion. So it was based off of that, and it's not in its final state, but I'm happy to share it with you, and as the year goes on, we say, oh yeah, that's right, we need to adjust this timeline for Auburn's sake, but and I'll share it with the entire committee.
Yeah, I just think it would be interesting to
Sure.
see, on top of all their other duties, what are these mandates that they need to,
Oh, yeah.
deadlines that they have to meet. So
Okay.
I would just like to see what that is.
Sure.
Thank
And I
you.
do think that it's important to state that as you look over this, and we really need to be diligent about this and really make sure that we definitely have a discussion about it probably at our next meeting. If you have any problems with anything that's on there, if you don't feel that you agree with anything that's on there, it's only fair to Dr. Brunel to talk to her about that now. That's the whole point of this, of her submitting an update. That way she's not surprised when the final evaluation comes through. So, we'll keep this on for a couple more, but I really would like to make sure that everybody is diligent in looking at that and giving any feedback that she needs.
Yeah, I did have one other thing, and unfortunately, I can't seem to find it. Dr. Bernal, I can't pinpoint it. You were very descriptive in a lot of your explanation, but there were some things that you were kind of very broad on, and I was just looking for some like specific examples to that stuff, and I apologize, I don't
Well, maybe
remember
that's
okay.
what exactly it was.
You know what,
but-
I think I'd like to talk to Dr. Brunel probably tomorrow and try to figure out the best way for us to address this during a meeting.
Okay.
Perhaps, I'm not sure I want to just,
Jump in.
yeah, I
Sure.
think we really kind of need to have a meeting that it's on the agenda and we actually go through it and give anybody any opportunity to give her feedback. Okay. Under new business, the request for Recreation Department for, request from the Recreation Department for the use of schools.
Yes.
If I may, I'm sorry,
No,
Dr.
no,
Bernal,
it's
before
okay.
you start, have you read this letter? I think it's missing lines or paragraphs or something because it makes no sense.
What are you talking about?
There's a back to it.
I know, but if you read this, it
Yeah.
makes no sense to me. The back paragraph, I just don't understand it.
I can tell you the premise behind it, and Mr. Proudy, please feel free to jump in. I know that you were at that meeting. Mrs. Pappas, Ms. Pappas is requesting as the Director of the Recreation and Culture Department for Auburn is there are times when she shares many of the different opportunities she's been able, or the Recreation and Culture have been able to provide to the citizens in Auburn. And that has been done through some cooperation clearly with the schools and finding space. In the winter in particular, with basketball practices and basketball games, that the gym is used constantly is probably a fair assessment, quite honestly. And what her request here is, if there is not available space at Auburn High School gym for the Auburn Rec and Culture programs, that she, speaking on behalf of her, the group, the council, that they be able to offer those programs at an alternate school, but at no charge. Because to use the Auburn High School facility, through the trust that was established, it can pay for site managers and costs associated with running those programs. But during times when the gym at the high school is occupied by student groups, by school programs, she may not be able to run certain programs, so she's asking to be able to use an alternate gym space at no
All right,
charge.
let me just,
Okay. That is not what is written here.
okay, but that's what she's requesting. She's requesting that.
Is that correct, Mr. Proudy?
Yeah.
Because you were there at that meeting, yes, yeah.
And the specific instance that was mentioned was a Zumba class. Now, you guys are all into Zumba. I'm sure.
Oh,
I
yeah.
saw
Oh, yeah.
an advertised on a gym going to Sturbridge today. But the Zumba class had to be canceled because we expanded the gym use to include middle school. So it isn't just high school use now. We're constantly expanding the use of the high school gym. And as we do that, we probably will do it more if we do volleyball. What she's asking for is, when do we get a chance?
Well, I knew about this, and my feeling about this was that there's a trust that allows us to recoup these expenses. So it's not really used for free because there's a cost involved to us, and since we can't take it out of our operating budget, we're using the trust to take that from. So one of the things that I was suggesting to Dr. Brunel is to find out if that trust, that money in that trust can be expanded to other facilities if in fact the gym at the high school is being used and Kristen wants to use another school. I don't know if that is feasible or not. Jane, you're shaking your head.
No, because we know that, you know as well as I do, that the interest from that trust is not covering all the costs associated with the town's use of that gym. And so by then turning around and saying, okay, well, now we're going to take it out and spread it over even more facilities, I mean, you're diluting the costs even more.
Well,
Yeah, but what was that, just
well,
specifically for that?
no,
high school
because,
student?
no, I don't necessarily agree with that, because if you're, any time that it's being used for school use, it can come from our budget.
Yeah.
If it's not being used for schools, then we would go to that
But-
trust. So if there's more time in there
wasn't my-
because
that
of
wasn't my point,
schools,
though.
there's less time, there's less money that you'd have to be taking from that.
But that wasn't my point. The point is that the use of the community already in the gym, I'm sure that if we did it dollar for dollar, depending again, I was on the committee, so, you know, well, do we include this or do we include that or don't we include that? You know, I mean, there was all kinds of questions about what costs you include. But I think that if you include the costs that at least I, as this committee member, thought should be included, I don't think the interest from the trust covers all the current use in the high school gym. Okay? And so consequently,
By non-school related functions.
by non-school related use. Okay? So I don't see how spreading that out to other schools, okay, where we're going to have to, I mean, not all the other schools have 24-hour custodian coverage. Not other schools have site managers on them. So, you know, we're going to be incurring those costs associated with that. So our costs are going to go up. They're already not being covered. So I just don't see this happening. I also like to comment, it's an educational facility. All right, it's not a clubhouse. It's not a community. It's an educational facility. And if we choose to have the middle school use it because it's an educational facility, I don't get the complaint. You know, we're not importing people from out of town to use it. It's an educational facility, and we're letting the students of Auburn use it in participation in our educational programs. And so I guess I just, you know, while I can appreciate the point, geez, we're sorry. I'm sorry, it's an educational facility, and we're using it for middle school sports and high school sports.
I have a question, and perhaps you don't know the answer to it tonight. Why are the middle school sports being transferred from the middle school up to the high school? Why is that happening? Do you know?
I can answer that. I can answer
Okay.
part of that. You can't even do a layup in the middle school gym. It's in practice. The kids can't even practice appropriately.
Well, there's mats on the walls.
You can't even-
I knew the answer,
Yeah.
but I just want to make sure.
You can't even practice
Right.
appropriately in the middle school gyms, and so consequently, that's why they're moving down.
Right.
It's good for Zumba.
It's good for Zumba. I like
Well,
to
I
see
think
you.
that makes a difference.
I'd like to see you do Zumba.
I know you would. I would like for the two of us go and do Zumba together. We'll see who gets it first. Would that be a sight,
And the
huh?
meeting deteriorates further.
When did you know, I have really very mixed. Let me let you guys talk first. That's really what I'm supposed to do. So.
I guess you know what, I want, you know, the recreation department's programs to succeed, I really do. But again, it was drilled in our head and drilled in our head and drilled in our head that our operating budget can't cover outside educational costs. So, it's twofold. First, you're saying that you don't think that what we're getting off of the interest of the trust is going to cover our cost. Let me finish.
I know, I'm just clarifying my point.
And if not, I don't know where we're going to come up with the money for that. But if that be the case, then extending that to other school facilities is going to leave us in a more detrimental position. So my question is, I like what you said, Liz, about your suggestion of if the interest from the trust can cover the expanded programs at the other facilities, in that trust interest is going to cover those expenses, yeah, I would be all in favor of it. However, if we're going to be incurring costs that we cannot pay for, then I have a problem with it. So,
Can I just clarify my point? It doesn't cover the cost depending on what you include in the cost. And there was a lot of controversy about what what that committee would agree to have included in the costs for purposes of applying to the trust to have the interest cover it. So let me clarify my point.
Okay.
Well, to me, we're basing a decision, and not, with all due respect, Janie, we're basing a decision on what you believe to be true. And I guess my suggestion would be, can we clarify that? Can we find out if the trust is in fact covering the cost? Because we probably should know that regardless of what action we take on this particular subject. But can we get some information about
Sure.
that and find out if in fact, could we? I know Kristen's working really hard, and I know I'm talking for all of us. She's doing a great job, and it's something that truly enhances the community. And I would love to see, as Leanne said, I'd love to see this succeed. The problem that I see here is that, again, we can't, look at the budget we have. How are we going to pay for more out of our budget? And so it leads me to the question that I keep asking is, why doesn't the recreation department have a budget? Is it because the schools are expected to provide her with a budget? I don't understand that. And so, given the fact that our budget is at bare bones right now, I can't see, and I don't think we can put any money towards the recreation department's needs. However, if we can figure out something with the trust, I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, let me clarify just one thing though, Liz. What you're saying is that with our budget, we can't, it's my understanding that legally we
That's what I said. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Is both ways.
Right,
We could.
okay.
Even
okay.
if
I don't want people to think we're bare bones,
Right,
yet
we-
we're unwilling
we
to.
can't, right.
We can't. But
Right,
state
right.
law says we can't.
No, I was looking at it for
Okay.
two ways. We can, and yet at the same time, look at what we've done to this budget. So,
I'll just put a hold on to it till the next meeting.
I would like to see somehow an accounting of what it is costing
Yeah,
for
that would be good.
the non-educational use of the gym. Because I don't think it's going to be considerably more than the interest from that trust. I also know that it costs us more to bring the middle school people down to use the big gym than it costs to send somebody else up to use the middle school gym. The middle school gym is a cheaper operation than the new high school gym.
Well, but from a utility perspective, but remember, we have to pay a site manager, and we have custodians that we have to pay. They don't have 24 hours, well, they don't have 7-day coverage like the.
Well, I don't know that
so-
they're asking for 7-day usage of
Well,
it. I think that they're looking for a swap. If we, if suddenly we have filled up the schedule, and we never anticipated 5 years ago that there wouldn't be time for community use of the gym. If there is no community use time, then we have misrepresented somehow the fact that there would be a sharing. And by sharing, I don't mean half and half, but there was definitely to be a sharing. And I was saying, well, we can bring in all sorts of other activities because it is more conducive to middle school basketball, and it is. And it's probably more conducive to a lot of activities. It's going to be very conducive to volleyball if we start that. But at the same time, that reduces the amount of community time for that gym.
But Ron, nobody ever said, and I agree with what you're saying, I agree with community use of the building, I wholeheartedly support it. But I'm not going to tell the middle school that, you have to practice or play in a gym where you can't do layups, so that we can have a Zumba class in the gym.
But that's why I wanted to look at the trust, because if we were keeping those teams at the middle school, and I understand why we're doing it at the high school, but if we were keeping them at the middle school, we'd be taking money from that trust for those Zumba classes and things like that. So I'm really curious as to what's going on with the trust and what the situation there is, because.
And in the analysis then, I'd like to see how much revenue we actually got from the trust this year, on top of
Yes,
what you think you
sure,
got.
we should see all the information. Yeah, and then we can make a decision.
The revenue was an outside article. in this year's budget, and we'll confirm that at the next meeting, but it was, I believe, it was 9,000 plus, and that figure was given to us last spring from the town accountant at that time. It is my understanding from the town accountant that the interest on the trust is anticipated, granted the downturn in the economy, but that it'll be a larger figure because it'll be reflective of a full year's interest on the trust for this coming May's town meeting. So we will be submitting in March an article for our town meeting to use those funds, and we won't have a definitive number from the town accountant until just prior to the town meeting as to what that'll be.
And again, I don't want to give anybody the impression that I'm don't want the community building. Absolutely, absolutely. But I just don't. I think if we're incurring additional costs by virtue of the fact we have programs running for whatever grade level in the school building, then we have to get that money from somewhere. And whether it be from the trust or whether it be by charging them some nominal fee, because the recreation department charges the people to participate in those events. It's not like, they're not free to the people to participate. So whether it's, tacking something onto that for the facility, whether it's,
Right.
covering them with money from the trust, however it's covered, it's got to be covered somehow.
My biggest thing is finding out about whether we can use a trust for it or not.
Yeah, and then
And
I
then
think
go
we
from
can
there.
Yeah, I think that's probably the way to go. Okay.
I took down notes. We will get information for you for the next meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, and the last, I'm sorry, we're still under new business. We're all set with new business?
Yes, I'll hold off on my statement till later.
Okay. The business and financial report, transfer of funds, Mr. Dede?
Through the chair, you have before you a transfer. We are in the process of doing some work at Bryn Mawr School for the purpose of responding to several special needs students. This is a transfer within the 4,000 series. I am not seeking approval from the committee, but merely to inform the committee that we'd like to transfer these funds so that we can make the appropriate and required accommodation to several students and thus several classrooms at Bryn Mawr School.
You don't need a motion for that?
Okay. I've been told we're not in need of an executive session, so I do need...
Two quick
Oh,
things. I'm
Mrs.
sorry.
Brunel wants to extend our meeting even longer.
Sorry. 2 minutes. I promise 2 minutes.
Tonight's Dr. Brunel's night.
I know. I'm sorry.
I was hoping I could waive it.
Well, you know what? I'm going to end on a positive note. How's that? Just wanted to share with you before you do have the luncheon brochure from yesterday's Mass Association of School Superintendents Scholars Luncheon. Megan Williams came before you several meetings ago, and it was a very nice affair. Megan represented the Auburn Public Schools extremely well. No surprise to any of us, I'm sure. And then also this morning had the opportunity to go to Auburn High School, where 44 of our students were honored with the John and Abigail Adams Scholars, which provides free tuition for students who have scored at least advanced in one area and proficient in the other area. And many parents came. It was a nice little breakfast, and Teresa was there to take a picture, so we'll soon be seeing pictures in the Auburn News about it. So 2 nice, very nice events to focus on students and their accomplishments. If you ever need to be humbled, go to this luncheon and hear what all of these students did in their educational careers, and the community service and the athletics and the fine arts that they do. And one of the final young women was fluent in 5 different languages, and it was really amazing. Amazing event. Huh?
Just like me.
Okay.
And me.
You said you had a couple things, was that it?
Those were the 2.
Okay. Okay, so I need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn. It's not 9 o'clock.
Did I get a second?
Second.
Oh, okay. All right, all those in favor? Aye. Aye.
Um,
Good night.